You step lightning. Some sort of window to your right. She goes left and you stay right. Between the lines, every blame. You begin to wonder why you came. Where did I go wrong? Lost and somewhere alone in the bitterness and I stayed up you all night. And I know I stayed alive. combination of words I could put on the back of a postcard. A song that I could sing, but I could try for your heart. Our dreams, and they're made out of real things, like a jukebox of photographs with sepia tone loving. Love is the answer, at least, for most of the questions in my heart. Why are we here and where do we go, and how come it's so hard? Not always easy, and sometimes life can be deceiving. I'll tell you one thing, it's always better when we're together. It's always better when we're together. Yeah, we'll look at them stars when we're together. Well, it's always better when we're together. Yeah, it's always better when we're together. And all of these moments just might find their way into my dreams tonight. But I know that they'll be gone when the morning light sings and brings new things. For tomorrow night you see that they'll be gone too. Too many things I have to do. But if all of these dreams might find their way into my day-to-day scene, I'll be under the impression I was somewhere in between, with only two, just me and you. Got so many things we got to do, or places we got to be. We'll sit beneath the mango tree, and yeah, so it's better when we're together. We're somewhere in between together. Well, it's always better when we're together. Yeah, it's always better when we're together. I believe in memories, they look so pretty when I sleep. Hey now and when I wake up, you look so pretty sleeping next to me. But there is not enough time, there is no song I could sing, and there is no.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy fourth semester.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing today?
Oh, great. Okay.
Anybody have class already this morning? A couple of you guys think peds, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in the swing of things. Was anybody able to use the Zoom link on the Zoom tab? Or was it only the one I posted? I'm not sure why.
I
only
clicked on
used the
it,
one.
and it said I could use it. I just had to be authorized, so I just had to sign in to my email, and then I could get in.
Oh.
But I had to copy the ID and then paste it into the Zoom thing.
Huh, that is so weird. Yeah, because I set it up the same way that I did last semester and there was no issues. So I'm wondering if it's just a switch over with the emails and stuff, if that has something to do with it.
It's probably because I'm in the class. Things mess up when I'm around. So it's sorry, everyone.
No, this morning in the peds as well, we had issues with the Zoom. It was the weirdest thing. So
Okay,
I don't know.
so that makes me feel better because I always feel better when it's not just me. I'm pretty tech savvy. Like I don't have issues too much with like figuring stuff out, but I feel like with the switch, we've had a lot more demons than normal. First week or two, there's always some like Canvas gremlins that are like working itself out. So we'll get through that. So I'm so happy to see all your guys' faces too. This helps me so much. So I'm gonna give it a few more minutes. We'll just start like saying hellos, I guess, while we're waiting for people. So my name is Professor Amy Wisniewski. You probably won't say my last name right, so Professor Wiz or whatever is fine. Wisniewski works too. Hopefully you watched the welcome video. But if not, I'm in beautiful Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where it is like 83 degrees today. I went from having my heat on over the weekend to maybe needing to turn on the air conditioning today. It's so warm.
It's the opposite over here. We got some snow down in southern Utah County, so I had to turn my heat back on.
Yeah, you keep that. Oh, so yeah, I have 3 teenagers, so send wine. Alex, you're from Milwaukee?
I sure am.
Hey, that's awesome. So I'm actually in Oak Creek, but nobody knows Oak Creek because it's a suburb. So
From.
hey, that makes me, I always love that. So that makes me very excited. I had a student last semester whose husband was from Wisconsin, and she's like, you guys got that spotted cow there. And she was like talking about the beer and stuff. I was like, oh, that feels so good. And like, yeah, so that's Louie. That is my boxer. Somebody's walking because it's nice out. Hey, so sorry about that.
My dog thinks that it's like in the room, so she's trying to say hi.
He gets lonely. Like, I don't know if you guys know boxers at all, but they're very personable dogs and they want to be by you like at all times. So I'll be talking and he'll like stuff his face like into the camera to say hello. So hopefully that doesn't bother anyone. But yeah, so I want to take a few minutes. This helps me with attendance too. I'm not going to do roll every day, but I will be scrolling through, making sure that cameras are on and that you guys are present. But for today, I want to take a couple minutes. Give me your name and the last show you binge watched. Maybe you got to binge watch something over break or something. That's what I want. So somebody can go, anybody can go first.
My name is Paulina, and the last show, well, I didn't even finish it. It was just a little bit, but The Queen of the South on Netflix.
Awesome.
My name is Christy Nebaker, and during the break, I had to binge watch the rest of This Is Us on Hulu and catch up.
I'm like 3 seasons behind.
My name is Michelle Liebert, and I binge watched The Witcher. I know I'm behind with the times, but I'm not patient enough to wait. I gotta wait for it to accrue, and so I can just go through it.
I have not seen that one. So that's good to know. And that's why I like to do this too. I either want to know your favorite song or what you last binge watched. So
I'm Carrie Peterson. We just finished Better Call Saul season 5, and I guess there's a season 6 coming because oh my gosh. And then we are on the second half of the last season of Ozarks. I'm trying really hard not to watch every single episode in one sitting. It's the hardest thing. It's so hard.
I've gotten to season 2 twice and I fall off in the middle of season 2 and then I just forget about it. So, all right. Awesome.
I'm Kaylee, and I just finished watching The Dropout on Hulu. It's about like Elizabeth Holmes. It's super interesting.
I'm Dylan Ellis. The last show that I just binge watched was also The Witcher. Excellent show. Highly recommend.
Add that to my list with all my free time.
I'm Kenzie, and last show I binge watched was Bridgerton.
I am also Kenzie, and the last show I watched was Formula One Drive to Survive.
I'm Micaiah, and I also just binge watched the second season of Bridgerton.
I need to get on that train.
I'm
My
Christina
name is
Jensen.
Mary.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't watch much TV, so the last one I watched was The Queen's Gambit. Loved that one.
That was so good. I'm with you.
So my name is Mary. I go by Mary if that's easier. I watched two. I binged 2 shows over the break. I watched the second season of Bridgerton and Inventing Anna.
That was awesome. I was very amused by that show. Like, that was crazy. The things people go through, like do blow my mind. Get away with stuff.
My name's Alexa. Oh, whoops.
Sorry.
I'll go ahead. My name's Alexa. The last show that I binge watched was Outer Banks.
All right.
My name is Daniel, and the last show I binge watched was Chicago Med.
My name's Madeline, and the last show that I binged watched was New Girl.
My name is Abby Grace. The last show I binge watched was Schitt's Creek.
I love that. Wait, hold on. He's like my role model. I want to be him when I grow up. All right.
My name's
My name's
Braxton.
Aaron.
Oh,
go ahead,
I
Aaron.
didn't. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't watch any series on television, but I did watch Jack Reacher shows or movies.
Okay.
My name's Braxton, and the last show I watched was the John Wayne Gacy tapes.
I love true crime.
My name's Johnny. I also watched that, and I also got caught up on The Rookie.
Okay.
My name's Taylor, and I just started the show called The Staircase on Hulu, and it's pretty good so far.
I saw that. That was really good.
My name's Alex, and I also watched New Girl. I binged that.
My name's Courtney, and I just finished watching The Boys on Amazon.
Season 3 comes out in June. Jensen Ackles is in that one.
My name's Anna, and this is Prada, and she'll probably be nosy the entire semester because she was the last 3. And the last thing I watched was Ozark. I'm on season 1, and I do think it's good, so I'm gonna keep going.
Look at Anna's face, or the Prada's face.
My name's Lydia, and the last one I watched was Suits.
I love that show.
My name is Amy, and the last show that I binge watched was The Resident on Hulu.
My name's Emily, and I just binge watched This Is Us, the rest of it, and then I'm starting the Pirates of the Caribbean.
You just started what? I'm sorry.
The Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, okay.
My name's Kelly. The latest show that I've been watching is the first 3 episodes of Under the Banner of Heaven on Hulu.
Is that the one about the Mormons, the Church of Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, it's about a murder that took place in the early 80s about the Mormons and some extremists. Is it good? I need to watch it.
It's been
There's
good.
only a couple episodes, right? I need them all. I like to have everything right in front of me so I can just keep going. I don't like waiting. Oh.
My name's Whitney, and I'm watching Only Murders in the Building.
Is that everybody?
My name is Paula, and I think the last show I watched, I don't watch a lot of shows, but it was New Girl as well.
My name's Mariah, and the last show I just watched was Love is Blind.
Oh.
My name is Rachel. I don't watch a lot of shows, but I do love to go to the movies. So I watched all 3 of the Dumbledore movies in a row.
Okay, awesome.
I'm Alex. I'm currently trying to get into Grey's Anatomy. We'll see how that goes.
Hey, that got me through nursing school. I'd have it on in the background while I was doing stuff. I'm not a silent studier. I need noise.
Yeah.
Like otherwise my thoughts wander way too much. And I make a lot of Grey's references in this class, so hopefully you'll get them.
I'm Jenny. I didn't binge watch anything. I just ripped my garage out over the break. But the last show that I watched was with my kids, and it was This Is Cake. Is This Cake?
Oh, I started that and I couldn't keep up with it because the one guy was driving me so bonkers. Like,
Was it the host?
the host is awful.
The host was awful. Me and my husband ended up watching that one night. We were like, what is this?
He was so bad. And then the very colorful man with the beard and the hair and the glasses, like, it grosses. I worked in food service for a long time and it just like grossed me out to see all the hair everywhere. Like, I'm a beard person, but not when it comes to my food. I don't know.
Same.
My name is Cami and I didn't binge watch anything. I just cleaned my house.
I mean, that's therapeutic too.
Yep.
That was my goal, Cami, but I did not end up doing any of it. I did get my friend to come deep clean my house, so that's good. I just couldn't do any of the cleaning myself.
I had the great idea to rip out my bathroom. Let me tell you how much of it is still actually like ripped out. That was not the greatest. It was very therapeutic, but that was not the greatest between semester activity, in case anyone was wondering.
I feel like this wasn't long enough to rip out a bathroom.
Oh, it was long enough to rip it out, just not long enough to put it back.
The next break is a lot longer, I think. I think it's like 4 weeks almost versus like this was only like, I swear it was only like 10 days.
What? Nuh-uh. In August, they're giving us 4 weeks between August and September.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's 3. I'm not sure.
Any-
We don't start till after Labor Day, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking way too far ahead.
It's like the 21st of August to like September 6th, I think. Let me, maybe don't quote them.
I need my breaks, Dylan. Come on now.
That's too much planning. I don't know if I can keep up that far. I barely have next week planned out, let alone tomorrow. So
What's going on next week?
that's the thing. I don't know.
I have color-coded like calendars on all my phones and for my kids because they're all in sports. So I need to know where I'm going every single day. So I am a planner. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So what else we got?
My name's Andy, and the only thing that I've been binging is the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case.
I need to get caught up. I just catch like little snippets and I'm deceased. Like some of the stuff that's coming out, I just can't handle.
My name is McKenna and I've been watching that, but I've also finished Ozark. So whoever said Ozark season 1, you have to keep going because they wrap it up really good. It's really amazing. I loved it.
Was that everybody?
No. So my name is Maggie, and the last show I watched was Ozark as well.
Awesome.
My name's Emily, and I binge watched The Ultimatum.
Ooh. All right. Let's see here.
Sorry, I'll go next. My name is Cynthia. Last thing I watched was All of Us Are Dead.
All of Us Are Dead.
It's like a K-drama.
Okay.
My name is Shaylee, and I just binged Game of Thrones.
That's another show I've only gotten like halfway through, and then I just like walk away. I don't know what's
It took
wrong
me
with me.
a hot minute. It was too much nudity at the beginning, and I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. And then everyone was talking about it, so I was like, I want to be a part of the conversation. So we pushed through, and it ended up being so good.
All right, was that everybody? Well, thank you for sharing that stuff with me. It helps me put faces to names and things like that. And you want me to know you, so it really does help. So real quick then, what did I last binge watch? I am currently rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer with my 13-year-old daughter. She's getting a big kick out of the special effects and the bigger cell phones. She's like, they pulled out the antenna. She's like, what are they doing to that phone? And it was cute. So that is what I'm currently binge watching. All right, so real quick, I just kind of want to go down and do a breakdown of the course and what it all entails. So hopefully you took a look around and you kind of saw things. So with this course, we have 5 unit exams or 5 exams that are 50% of your grade. And then we have a final exam that is worth 25% of your grade. So your exams are 75% of your grade. And then we have homework assignments that are 10% and APA assignments that are 15% of your grade. I can tell you that people that, well, do your homework. Get every point you can. Missing assignments is one of the easiest ways to fail class. And it has happened, and I don't want that to happen to you. And then I'd have to be all mean. I'm like, you had 4 missing assignments. What do you want from me? So just turn them in. That being said, the first week assignment, we're doing it a little bit different this semester because there were some issues at the start of last semester. Log into ATI. Has anybody accessed it yet? I know a few people did, but I didn't know if anybody from here.
Not this semester, no.
Okay, so the assignments are customized practice quizzes. Okay, so when you go into ATI and you go underneath like your test, you can search, excuse me, for different things. If you click on practice, it should populate. So if somebody could do that now, I can't see it even with student view. But I want to make sure that we have the right location and that it's visible. If you are a repeat student, make sure that your cohort says that you are the 1222 cohort, because if it does not, you won't see the assignment either.
Okay, oh, hold on. Okay, now where did you want us to go in ATI?
I believe it populates under either your exam tab.
I think I found it. I'm looking underneath the test tab.
Yes.
And then it has like your proctoring, dry run, and then the learning systems. If I scroll all the way to the bottom, it says week 1 respiratory assessment and care modalities.
That is it.
Ah, thank you.
So it's under your test tab. Thank you. Because when we click on the test tab, we can see all the proctored ones and stuff, but the practice ones, for whatever reason, ATI doesn't let us see, even though we created them. So the rest of them will be up there within the next few days or so. We're just switching everything over. We just wanted to get week 1 out to you guys. I know some of you like to work ahead, and they will be available to you, with the exception of week 14. So there's 10 questions. You answer them, you get a score at the end. Take a screenshot of that score. Let's say you get 7 out of 10. Okay, submit that screenshot. You can also then create or find 3 NCLEX style questions relevant to that week's content and submit it for your full 10 points. So even if you bomb your quiz questions, and I don't even like to use the word the practice questions, you can still get the full 10 points. But you have to submit both components. So you have to show me the screenshot, and it should have your name on it, and then submit a document, a Word doc with your questions on there, following the instructions that are given on the assignment. So multiple choice, no true false, answer is highlighted, and there's a rationale provided. Do that and you'll get full points. So is it more work if you get more wrong? Yes. But if you didn't know it, you can still get those points back. So what I tell students, like if you screw up the question on chest tubes, maybe give me a practice question on chest tubes because you didn't get it, and it'll help you get it a little bit more versus picking something about breath sounds or something. It's entirely up to you, but the question needs to be relevant to that week's discussion. Okay.
And
so
I'm sorry, the exams during the semester, are they proctored or are they on Canvas?
They are proctored. Exam times are posted also in the assignments tab. So your first exam will be either May 31st at 10 a.m. or 6 p.m. or Wednesday, June 1st at 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. Your first typically exams are going to be Mondays and Tuesdays. However, that first exam falls on a holiday, so we had to shift it 2 days. So
And when it says that it's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, like obviously we have class like right now. So it's not like it's not instead of class, like it's
yeah, missing
Okay.
class to take an exam is not permitted.
Okay.
And we know when the other exams are, because I know that there's an overlap. One exam overlaps with peds and one exam overlaps with OB in terms of having 2 tests in 1 week, but we give you enough time to make adjustments for that. So keeping that in mind. Week 1 is just, the exam 1 is just wonky because of the Memorial Day holiday. Otherwise, it's Mondays at 10 and 6 or Tuesdays at 8 and 6. So there's daytime and evening options. We do an exam review the week before. So those times will get posted closer to that time period. If you are one of the students going to Honduras, communication will be sent out to you if there's an exam during your time period. I just got the email this morning of the students that are going, and I did not even get a chance to look to see what would interfere with that. But with my classes, I have the students typically take the exam beforehand, and it works out pretty well. But I don't know if there's even an exam when you guys are there. So more information on that to follow. Questions on the ATI assignments? Okay. So there used to be a like 10-page paper associated with this class, and we decided that that was not the best use of your guys' times or mine. So it's broken down into smaller assignments. Your very first APA assignment is a reference page, properly formatted with 3 references. So if you look at the breakdown, we want a textbook, a scholarly journal, and a website. That's it. Don't overthink it. I don't care what book it is, what website it is, whatever it is. If the source is outdated, I don't care. What I care about is, did you format it correctly? Italics in the right spot, periods in the right spot, hanging indents, things like that. It's 10 points, but just don't overthink it. Guys, you could even take a reference page from a different paper from a different semester and submit that. I don't care. I just want to make sure that you guys can format things correctly. That's the whole purpose. And I think that's due already next week. Pretty easy. The second assignment is on, which one is that? The disease. So you are going to create a PowerPoint presentation, 10 slides on a disease. The diseases you have to choose from are listed in the instructions because they're all diseases we cover in this class. It makes sense that you would learn about a disease that you're going to be tested on in this class and not something we don't cover. So that being said, it needs to be on one of those. Or if you look through and see kind of the things that we're doing and you're like, I would really love to do something on psoriasis, because we cover skin. Clear it with me and I can be like, okay, but no sickle cell anemia, no cancers, because we don't cover that. I want you guys to focus your studies on what we cover in this class. So, but pretty simple stuff, just breaking down the disease for me. So it helps you get an understanding. Then the third assignment is a cultural assignment. And this one is my favorite. You guys are going to present to me something about a culture. The cultures are listed. You'll notice if you look at which ones are there, Hispanic and African Americans are not on that list. I want you to go outside the box and explore a different culture that you may know nothing about. Do you know anything about Maori people or Hmong or anything like that? that you may come in contact with. So I want you to grow a little bit. So you can present some things, either record a Zoom, do a YouTube video, a voiceover PowerPoint, anything that's teaching me about that culture. There is also the option to do a paper. I think the presentations go a lot better than the papers, but that's just me in terms of grading. But yeah, so that's a fun one. And then we do have a APA paper in this course. There's a case study. I'll post the template later on, closer to like in a week or two. Going over the nursing process. How would you care for somebody with this is what's going on? It's like 5 pages. So that's the breakdown. Questions, concerns?
I have a question about the ATI assignments. Do you like make up your own questions, or do you pull some from ATI?
For the homework or for the exams?
For the for like the quizzes.
For the homework quizzes, they are their questions. And you should see rationales too. And then for exams, it is a combination of their questions, our questions, and edited questions from question banks. So
I mean, like when you get one wrong and you need to make up a question for it.
Oh,
do you make your own, or do you pull from ATI?
You can make your own. You can pull from question banks. You can go through old books. I mean, you can do a Google search of an NCLEX question and tons will pop up. So
okay, thanks.
So are the exams, is it 50 questions for each unit exam?
Yes, 50 questions, 100 points each. So each question is worth 2 points. And then the cumulative exam final is 100 questions, but 100 points. So every question will be worth 1. We do not have a big ATI mastery exam in this course. So you'll have your big exam, like how you had for fundamentals last semester and the other ones. You have that in OB and PEDS, but you do not have that in this course. It'll be next semester. So you can be happy about that one.
So I just kind of have a clarifying general question, and it might be stupid, so bear with me here. But as far as what we should expect to try and understand from this course, I didn't get a very clear understanding from the syllabus. It's very generalized, just basically saying it's building on what we've already learned. So my question is more so, what can we expect as far as day-to-day coursework? Are we going to be doing a lot of case studies where we take a patient, these are their symptoms, what do we do to treat them? That kind of thing.
It truly depends on the week. First few weeks, it's more of lecture components and practice questions throughout and discussion. Your goal in this course is to know how to care for somebody with these diseases or conditions. Can you recognize them? If you can utilize the nursing process through diseases, you will be successful. So take COPD. You learned in patho and anatomy like what COPD is on a cellular level, right? So now what are you going to do about it? What assessment findings would you expect with this disease? What are my expected findings? What is normal? What is abnormal? What triggers my brain to think, wow, that sounds like COPD or whatever? Diagnostics. What tests would we do? X-rays, CT scans, lab work. What findings would we have with that would confirm it? And then planning. What are our goals? What teachings would we do? We're big on teaching. What interventions would you do with somebody with COPD? And then like, how would we evaluate it and put it into practice? If you can do that for all these major diseases that we talk about, you'll be very successful on the exams. We test a lot on interventions, a lot on teaching. Yes, there's meds because meds are part of interventions. But we want to know that you can care and you can recognize signs and symptoms with this. So there'll be a lot of nursing process still incorporated into this. One of you guys have seen the questions, which one is an indication of further teaching is needed. So maybe when you're studying, you're thinking, okay, if I have COPD, don't smoke. And if I have what would be the opposite? What would say, hey, this isn't good? I can still smoke on my oxygen or something like that. So I know we hate care plans. Care plans are like the bane of nursing students' existence, but they actually do have a purpose because they're teaching you how to care and recognize these things, which is probably all that they're good for because they change when you get into practice. But yeah, so we'll do some reviews of stuff on like a cellular level to an extent. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you I don't have your patho book, so the answers that were in those books, I don't always have. So I might refer you back to that if it's something that I don't know. I'm teaching you more how to care for things versus that cellular level. So if you have like a bio question, I'm probably not your person. But if you have an intervention or a safety or priority, I got you. So.
Can you tell me what the ATI book is called that we're going to be using in this class?
RN Adult Medical Surgical Nursing Edition 11. Sorry, my filter is blocking the book. And then your textbook is, you guys have the ebook, and be thankful because this thing is freaking huge. Yeah, the Bronner and Hinkle and Cheever. Be thankful for e-editions. But you should be able to access that right now in Canvas in your modules. If you click on the modules tab, it should be, I believe, the course textbook. It's right there at the top. Please do not come to me before exam 1 after having 3.5 weeks of content and saying, Amy, I don't know how to find my book. I might cry. So I had that last semester. Students took the first exam without knowing where their textbook was. So don't be the reason why I drank. No, I'm just kidding. Any other questions?
Is one textbook like weighted or recommended over the other? Because obviously it's listed in both textbooks.
Yeah. So I will be completely honest. I don't love your textbook for some things, but other things I really do. Sometimes the language is a little too much in the textbook, and ATI will break it down a little bit more. But ATI doesn't go in depth. It's very basic in their concepts. So truly you need both. But if you're getting overwhelmed by the reading, focus to what we discuss in class and in the PowerPoints. And if you're using the PowerPoints and you're like, you know what, I still don't get chest tubes, then jump to your textbook to help solidify that. I know it's a lot of reading, but at least gaze over it before coming to class. So that way what we talk about in class makes sense. Because the whole purpose of this course or class is to take what you prepared and fill in gaps. So some people like the book, some people don't. It truly depends on your learning style as well. Also, I am a very matter-of-fact person. So if I don't say it, my face will. But I have a very dry sense of humor. So I like laughter. I try to incorporate comedy, not comedy like a stand-up comedian, but memories are tied to emotions. And if something is really funny when you're learning it, you tend to remember it a little bit more. So I'm not going to be the square root of the hypotenuse type person, but trying to find something that'll make you like connect it. So just throwing that out there now. But test questions come from both your textbook and your ATI book. And there'll be certain things where I'll say, you know what, this is a nice to know. Nursing students focus on the wrong stuff. Like 80% of the time, you see numbers or something like that, and you completely skip over something else. So I want to try to help focus that a little bit, look at these charts on this page because this is a great resource, or just, it's great. If you know this, great, but it's not going to help you be a better nurse or a safe nurse.
So I had a question. I've heard that the first respiratory or the first exam, which is the respiratory exam, I've heard that that one is the hardest. Is that true?
I think it's the hardest only because you may not be comfortable with NCLEX style questions, priorities, or you go too fast. So yeah, it was difficult from last semester, but mostly because people missed keywords. So taking your time is helpful. You get 90 seconds per question. And it turns out, I think it ends up being like 75 minutes to take the 50 question exam. So when I have people done in 18 minutes, I'm like, I can't even shower in 18 minutes. Like, I don't know how you guys are like getting through 50 questions that quickly. So yeah, and the style questions are a little bit different. You know, your previous courses are a lot of memorization, right? Patho is a lot of memorization. Pharm is a lot of memorization. This is putting things into practice. So what would you do? What is the priority? ABCs, threat to life. That's going to be your answer. But people will go for something else. What can we do immediately to change the status of this patient? That's going to be your answer, especially if it's a priority question or safety. We'll get you through it. We take breaks every hour-ish. Like I usually talk for an hour. We do stuff for an hour or so, and so we'll break twice. So that being said, we're at 10:40. Do you want to take a few minutes and then come back and start content, or do you want to start content for a little while and then take a break?
Let's do it now so that way we can get the content all in. And I'm chilly and need a sweatshirt.
All right, so it is 10:39. I like even numbers, so we will come back at 10:50. Okay, so 11 minutes.
Okay.
All right. And she calls me 'cause I'm still awake. Can you help me unravel my latest mistake? I don't love him. Winter just wasn't my season. Yeah, we walked through the door, so accusing, your eyes like they have any right at all to criticize. Hypocrites, you're all here for the very same reason. Cause you can't jump the track, we're like cars on a cable, and life's like an hourglass glued to the table. No one can find the rewind button, girl. So cradle your head in your hands and breathe. Just breathe. Oh, breathe. Just breathe. May turn 21 on the base, a fourth list just today. He said down to the flask in his fist. Ain't been sober since maybe October of last year. Here in town, you can tell he's been down for a while, but my God, it's so beautiful when the boy smiles. Wanna hold him, maybe I'll just sing about it. Cause you can't jump the track, we're like cars on a cable, and life's like an hourglass glued to the table. No one can find the rewind button, boys. So cradle your head in your hands and breathe. Just breathe. Oh, there's a light at each end of this tunnel. You shout 'cause you're just as far in as you'll ever be out. These mistakes you make, you just make them again. If you're on without dreaming.
no longer inside of me, threatening the life it belongs to. And I feel like I'm naked in front of the crowd, 'cause these words are my diary screaming out loud. And I know that you'll use them however you want to. But you can't jump the trunk without cards on the cable, and lights striking now, there's blue to the table. No one can find the rewind, but now it's saying it if you understand. And breathe, just breathe, oh breathe.
All right, let's bring it on back here. One last thing before we get started that I forgot, office hours. My office hours are posted on calendars, so you can sign up for any of the days or times. If those times don't work for you, shoot me a message and say, hey, professor, I can't meet these times, but I could meet this time, this time, this time. Give me 3 options. I'll find something that works. I might have to meet you on Zoom while I'm at a baseball game, but I'll do it. So whatever you need, I got you. There'll be some weeks where I will be in a
Go
hotel.
Brewers.
Yes, exactly. My boys both are on travel teams. So like tonight I have a doubleheader after class. So I'm always somewhere, but I have my phone, I have my tablet, I'm accessible. I try to respond to emails as quickly as I can, obviously not during class times. But I don't know about you, my email on my phone is not working anymore. Like it makes me log in every single time and I don't know what's going on. So
Mine neither. And I took it off the phone and now I can't get it back. And it's driving me crazy. And I'm gonna just go nuts and I won't be around for 5th semester because I'm gonna be crying.
I know how to fix it. I know how to fix it.
How do I fix it? Because I need to know,
Okay.
because I don't want to like get a message like, why aren't you answering students' emails? Because I didn't see it.
So it's on your phone, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So someone told me how to do it. So you go to your inbox and then you go down, you click on the upper left-hand corner, wherever you're, like mine says a C because I'm Christy, but you just click on that. You go down to the little settings button on the very bottom left-hand side. And then let's see, you go to, it's basically, it still has your Ameritech email. And I think, yeah, you just click on, so I think you click on the little, I think it's Office 365. And then you click on that and does it list your old email, the Ameritech?
I'll have to take a look. Yeah, I was like, I
Yeah.
can send IT a ticket because I like to respond pretty quickly.
Yeah, I did
I'm a
that.
night owl too. So you might get an email from me at like, 12, 1 in the morning, but it just truly
Yeah,
depends.
I did that and you just put in your new Joyce email and then I think you have to sign in maybe like once or twice, but I was getting really annoyed by that and it fixed it.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, Christy, if you could send that to me because then I had other people talking to me at the same time. So considering we're in the same class for once, it's nice. Hey, if
Yeah.
you could please send that to me, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Someone on our Facebook group showed me how to do it because I said there has to be a way and I am technologically like not very good at this kind of stuff. So yeah, someone helped me. So yeah, I'll send it to you.
Thank you, because I had to take it all the way off the phone and now I can't get it back and it's driving me batty.
Yeah, I feel good about technology, but Microsoft and I are not friends. I have major issues with Microsoft. I don't know why, but it makes me look like I'm a 95-year-old person trying to figure out technology. No offense to 95-year-olds, but I just feel incompetent. And I don't like that feeling. So, all right then, let me share my screen and we will begin our very first unit. All right, should be nice and big for you guys, right? All right, perfect. Because I have your version, I have my speaker notes version, all that good stuff. So there may be a few slides that are either out of place or new picture. Don't freak out. Sometimes we just like to add things because we want a little bit more, or it wasn't clear enough last semester. So if there's something that you want, we can always share it. But for the most part, it stays pretty consistently the same. All right, so we're going to jump right into functions of the respiratory system. This first part is going to kind of gloss over stuff that you guys already know. What does the upper airway consist of? Don't overthink it.
The upper airway structures, the mouth, the larynx, the nose, trachea. I think trachea might be lower respiratory actually.
It's upper. So upper's got your nose, your paranasal sinuses, your pharynx, your tonsils, your adenoids, if you still have those two, larynx and trachea. The whole purpose of the respiratory system is to transport oxygen to the rest of the body, which will happen through respiration, ventilation, diffusion, and perfusion. All those components. With oxygen transport, the oxygen is going to go to the cells and take the CO2 away. We have that exchange of gases. And this is done through the capillaries. With respiration, we have a gas exchange between the air that you breathe and then the blood, the air that you breathe and the blood, and then between the blood and the cells of the body. So we're moving stuff around. That's all that's happening. What's interesting is that ventilation is the air moving in your chest. Okay, that's what we see rise up and down. So we're counting respirations, but you're actually counting ventilation. Ventilation is the air moving in the thoracic cavity. Respiration is the moving of gases across the membranes. But nobody's going to say, oh yeah, let me count your ventilations. We count respirations, but it's actually kind of the opposite. So, because it's not confusing at all. At any rate, ventilation is the movement of the thoracic cavity. Respiration is the movement of those gases. So oxygen transport is going to happen in the alveoli, in the tissues. This is where the exchange of gas is going to occur. Again, I don't spend a ton of time on this. We know this already. That's how stuff happens. With respiration, we have the exchange between air and blood and between the blood and the cells. So it goes here and then it goes there. Deoxygenated blood comes from the lungs, from the heart and lungs. And then we have concentration gradients that occur with this as well. Diffusion occurs and it's going to move oxygen to where it needs to go. Basic stuff here. Nothing that's probably earth-shattering to you guys at all. Ventilation, again, is the movement of the thoracic cage and diaphragm. Your thoracic cavity should expand when you inhale. Do you breathe properly? Probably not. When you take a deep breath in through your nose, your chest should expand. And then when you exhale, it goes down. So if you really, we don't think about breathing, but a lot of times people don't breathe right, which is really interesting to me. Inhalation requires energy. So people that have respiratory issues, if you can't breathe, are spending more energy to breathe. So some of our respiratory disorders are really, they get pooped out really quickly because it takes so much more work to breathe than you or I. And then exhaling is going to be more of a passive process. So with inhalation, the diaphragm is going to move down and everything kind of expands. And then when you exhale, it kind of just goes back to where it was. Let's see here. We have air pressure variances inside that thoracic cavity. Air is going to go from high to low pressure. We also have some things with resistance, and that is when something is blocking the air from getting through. So if we have closed off alveoli, or if we have fluid in the lungs, there's going to be increased resistance. It's going to make more effort for us to breathe, which is not a good thing. We should not be thinking about breathing, but for those that have to, it is a very big concern. One thing that you guys do need to understand significantly is compliance. So compliance sounds like it would be a good thing, like we're falling into it, and it kind of is. So compliance in terms of respiratory is really talking about how well the lungs expand and recoil inside the chest cavity. Increased compliance, that sounds like it'd be a good thing, right? Like we're breathing super well. No, increased compliance is a bad thing. This is what we see with our COPDers. The lungs cannot recoil the way that they're supposed to, and they become over distended. They're stretched out way too far. So breathing requires more effort. With decreased compliance, that's a bad thing too. The lungs are stiff and they require a lot of work for you to breathe. We see this a lot with our obese patients. The lungs are fighting against the adipose tissue to breathe, and it requires a lot of work for them to breathe. So increased compliance, we have too much stretch. Decreased compliance, they're too stiff. They're both bad. We don't want either one. Okay. There are lots of pictures in your charts, but and charts in your book, but don't get too caught up on them. That is more of a nice to know thing. I want you to understand increased compliance. They've lost the recoil. COPD is a big thing with that. And then decreased, they're stiff and not working as well as they should. And we see that more with either fluid in the lungs or morbid obesity. There's some stuff in your book from 485 to 488 that is really, it's nice to know stuff. Up to the part where it starts about assessment. So there we go. Okay, first polling question. Let me pull this up here. I love seeing all your faces. I'm so excited. All right, so I got 33 answered. I will take that. Oh, there we go. Almost 94%. Outstanding. All right, so increased compliance means that the lungs are stretched out. Lungs requiring a lot of energy to expand is going to be that decreased compliance. Increased compliance, they do not work better than normal. They work really poorly, and they are not working as expected. So high five. Cruising right along. Diffusion and perfusion. I wish we could like learn through diffusion, just like, you know, osmosis. Diffusion is when we're having gases go from high concentration to lower concentration. This can happen, it happens in the lungs and in the tissue. We're going to exchange O2 and CO2 from high to low. And then with the tissues, we're going to take the CO2 and switch it with the O2. It's going to go from high to low. That's it. Perfusion. So perfusion is the blood flow throughout the body. When we have impaired perfusion, that means we're not getting good blood flow. If we're not getting good blood flow, we're not getting good oxygen. So we'll see things like blue fingers, blue lips, that sort of thing, if it's not going to where it's supposed to be. So perfusion can either be pulmonary, where we're going to have stuff going through the pulmonary vasculature, the lungs, and all the vessels inside of there. And then the tissues is going down to everywhere else in the body. But that's all perfusion is. But we need perfusion. Otherwise, oxygen and blood is not going to those areas. If we don't get blood and oxygen, what happens? Don't overthink it. What happens if there's no blood, no oxygen?
Tissue death.
We die.
It's dead. It's going to become ischemic and die. So we need perfusion throughout the body. The diffusion and stuff, again, that's not something we see happen or we know happen, but that's what's going on inside, the exchanges of gases from high to low. That's it. All right, so now let's talk about health assessment. So when we talk about health history, there's a lot of things that we need to talk about. So if they're coming into you, we're going to ask questions like, when did it start? What symptoms do you have? Certain symptoms are specific to certain systems, okay? Shortness of breath, cough, wheezing, that's all respiratory. But if somebody is presenting to you with those symptoms, we're going to start asking questions. When did it start? What's going on? Are you expectorating anything? That's one of my favorite words, by the way. We can tell a lot by the color of people's bodily fluids. So if they're coughing up green mucus, it's infectious. If it's just more clear or yellow tinted, not as concerning. But we want to know what's going on with this. So shortness of breath. When did it start? What were you doing? Same thing with the cough. And then hemoptysis, is there blood? Are you coughing up any blood? If there is any concern about somebody swallowing, that is a huge safety concern. Why do I care if they can swallow or can't swallow?
You don't want them to aspirate or choke.
Exactly. They are at high risk for aspiration. Aspiration can lead to aspiration pneumonia. In some of our patients, that pneumonia can lead to their deaths. Yes, I know it's dramatic, but if we have concerns over somebody swallowing, don't put anything in their mouth. We also need to dive into their health history. Tell me about your medical conditions. I don't have any. Okay, but I can see that you're on metoprolol, metformin, but you don't have any health issues. So let's break this down. Social history. If somebody's coming to you with respiratory issues, what social questions would you want to start asking?
You live in downtown Salt Lake during the all the better.
Okay, so that is important. Where do you live? Cities have more congestion, more smog. It can cause a lot of respiratory issues. Somebody said, do you smoke? What should that entail? What also should we include in that?
Vaping. How many packs they smoke?
So what do you smoke? First and foremost. Cigarettes, vapes, marijuana, all that stuff matters. Okay. And I always preface this with my patients. I'm an ER nurse, so I've seen a lot. I don't care what you do. I just want to know what you do so I don't kill you. That's it. I'm not calling the cops. I could give two hoots about what you do in your free time. You do you, but I just need to know because I want to help you. So finding out how much, how often, that sort of thing is important. Not only that, maybe they say they don't smoke. We need to know if their family members do too, because people, secondhand smoke can be absolutely catastrophic, or maybe they grew up with a smoker. Maybe they didn't live with them for 15 years, but we can still see the effects of secondhand smoke decades later. So what else would be important to know? Where they live, do they smoke?
Maybe where they work.
Oh, who said where they work?
Me. Maybe if they're like inhaling chemicals at work, or if they work for a mining company, just different stuff that can cause lung.
Yeah, we always think mining, but like dry cleaners, oh my goodness, they can have so many lung issues, or painters if they don't wear their respirators, mechanics, that sort of thing. So yeah, their job is extremely important here. Anything else?
Have they come across these grouping of symptoms that they're currently experiencing, and what did they do at the time to treat them?
Yeah. Or did you go anywhere? Did you travel anywhere? Maybe they went to somebody where TB, tuberculosis, was really prevalent, or there could be a COVID outbreak. We actually don't talk about COVID in this class so much because stuff was changing so much, it was hard to keep up with, and you were seeing more of it in clinical than we were going to teach you in class. So just keeping that out there too. And then family history. That goes without saying. In terms of the physical assessment with the respiratory system, we can tell when somebody's in respiratory distress more often than not. What are some key physical assessment findings would you expect in somebody in respiratory distress?
Now, would the clubbing fingers be just anybody in respiratory distress, or is that someone who's had it for longer than usual?
Clubbing usually occurs with our COPDers, and it has to do with delayed oxygenation into the fingers. So that is something we'd see in COPD, but if it was like all of a sudden I couldn't breathe, I wouldn't have clubbing of the fingers. That occurs over years and years and years. So if I couldn't breathe, what would you expect to see?
The patient would be restless. They would have, like, you would be able to see their work of breathing, like, it was really exhausting. They would have like high respirations.
We sit in the
Retractions.
position, leaning forward.
Okay. Position, I'm trying to open up my airway.
We're also
So-
going to see social symptoms like anxiety, distress.
100%. COPD patients, and I keep using COPD because that's usually the ones that you see the most with adult patients. The anxiety is real. And it totally makes sense, because if you can't breathe, if you've ever not been able to breathe for any reason, it is terrifying. You feel death right there. So definitely the anxiousness, some hesitation, or not hesitation, irritation, irritability, that sort of thing. Accessory muscle use, intercostal retractions are very bad things. We don't want to see that. That means we're working so hard to breathe, versus it's just not something, it's not a normal finding. That's a finding that, like, crap, something is wrong. They're gonna tank. Cyanosis, you may or may not see cyanosis on a patient based off of the color of their skin. And it's something that is very oftenly missed in some of our darker pigmented patients. I'm as white as the day comes, like I am pale. So when I'm even paler, you can really, really tell, but you would see if I was blue, right? You can't always see that in certain pigments, especially when there's blue undertones. So where would I look for cyanosis? Yep, lips, eyes.
Thumbs.
Yep, any of those mucous membranes. So eyeballs, no, in your mouth. You can't tell on finger beds so much. And sometimes we have to say, like, to family members, like, is this their normal coloring? And it's not a bad thing. We don't know this person from Adam, right? You can look at your own child or your spouse or your mom and be like, wow, she does not look normal, because we know them. I don't know who I'm taking care of, so.
We had an experience in our first semester clinical where there was a guy in a long-term care, and we all looked at him and we're like, that guy is blue. What is going on? He's blue. And we asked the staff, we're like, can he breathe? What's going on? And they're like, oh no, that's his normal coloring. I guess that he worked in a factory when he was younger, and those are the effects of working at that factory. So it made him blue. So anyway, it was just funny, but I was like, what the heck?
It's important to know as well. And there's actually a medical condition. Somebody did a paper on it for me a couple semesters ago about these people in Kentucky, I think it was, where they're blue. Their hemoglobin is blue. So they have this blue tint. And I think it's it's a genetic thing bred from one family. It's a defect. It was very interesting. But it's important to know patients' baselines, and we ask, and it's not rude. We just need to know. Other physical things that we're going to look at: upper respiratory. If we can't breathe all of a sudden, is there an obstruction? If there's an obstruction, what breath sound would we associate with an obstruction? Anybody know?
Strider.
Strider. Ooh, it is awful. It has this whistling sound. The air is trying to escape around the obstruction. But we can take a look. If any of you have children, you know that they stick things in places that they don't belong, marbles in noses and things like that. And I can tell you, as in taking care of adults, that does not go away. I have had plenty of here, hold my beer moments, and then trying to remove objects from places that they don't belong, because people are just special. In terms of the lower respiratory, we're going to use our eyes. We're going to look for those retractions, accessory muscle use, watching their positioning, like we mentioned. When we can't breathe, we historically lean forward. And that is good because it's allowing for maximum expansion of our lungs. Laying flat is not a good position if you're trying to breathe. Even worse if you are obese or have boobs, because it is harder to work through the tissue. So if somebody can't breathe, let's sit them up, please. And then we're going to listen. So let's look, and then we're going to listen. So if we are having issues with the airway, depending on the condition, we have different findings. With asthma, which we talk about next week, we have a lot of constriction. We have different sounds. With obstructions, we also have different sounds. And then with loss of, never mind, I'm gonna move on. I hate the way that that was worded. All right, so in this textbook, this chart is in your book. It is important to understand what diseases cause what sounds. That's where I'm trying to go with this. So crackles, okay? Crackles mean what?
Pneumonia.
Moisture. We got liquid somewhere in there and we got to get them out. If you listen to somebody and you hear crackles, what is one thing that you can do right there?
Help them cough.
Have them cough and then re-listen. Sometimes we just got to clear it out, and coughing can be one of those ways to see if it happens. So crackles in general are usually associated with liquid. Okay, some kind of, maybe it's pneumonia, maybe it's CHF fluid that's causing issues with the breathing, something like that. We got liquid in the lungs that don't belong there. Let's clear it out. Wheezes have to do, we associate wheezes with asthma most commonly, and it has to do with alveoli collapsing, mucus getting in the way, but wheezes and asthma go hand in hand. Then we also have our friction rubs, which usually has to do with stuff rubbing on things. That's why it's a rub. Very common with the pleural sac around the lungs, just being invaded with pleural fluid due to another condition. So, where's my mouse? This, opened up in another. I hate ads on YouTube. They need to stop. All right. Can you see my video? Okay.
James, I'm now going to listen to the chest. You can just take some deep breaths in and out through your mouth.
I don't know why the captions were in Arabic. That's interesting. So in terms of for you guys, you have to understand, we usually see wheezes with asthma and COPD. We usually associate it most with asthma, narrowing of the airway. That's what wheezing means. So what are we going to do about it? Open up the airway. Okay. And we'll go more into that next week. Coarse crackles, we got fluid in the lungs. And then fine crackles usually has to do with scarring. For the most part, with your scope of practice, if you can identify crackles, that's what they want you to be able to identify. When you start getting into things like fine and coarse, it's important, but at the same time, crackles are crackles, if that makes sense. Okay. So let me, all right, let's do another poll question here. All right, oh wow, everybody answered. Awesome. All right, yes, 100%. Coarse crackles indicate we have fluid in the lungs. So let's get it out. All right. Okay, the diagnostics. Let's jump into those because these are all part of our assessment phase, right? So our pulse ox, our gold standard, right? Non-invasive, easiest thing that we could possibly do. This is going to tell us the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin. Please do not say an O2 stat. It is not an O2 stat, it's an O2 sat. Sorry, it's a pet peeve of mine. And it's going to tell us how well we're breathing, right? So there are times where it is not always as accurate as we want it to be, okay? And we see incorrect numbers, usually due to the poor pleth. If you've ever watched a monitor, even with the breathing, we can see waveforms, and sometimes it'll be kind of wonky. If it's not getting a good reading on the finger, that's called a poor pleth, that little wiggly line. With carbon monoxide poisoning, we also have incorrect CO2 or O2 levels, so it doesn't always give us the most accurate reading. We have to go more off of like ABGs and that sort of thing. And we also get poor O2 numbers when they're hypovolemic. If there's not good blood flow because of massive hemorrhage, we're not going to get the numbers that we want. So these sensors can be placed in more than just the finger. We see it in the finger, it's the easiest one to get, but if somebody is cold, we're not going to get good numbers. So we can do things like the earlobe is a really good choice, or even like the nose or the lip. If they are truly, truly concerned, there may be some other ways that we can go about it too. I haven't seen too much with like the forehead or even the bridge of the nose. It's usually the ear. And if you can't get it on the ear, we probably have bigger fish to fry. With babies, we can wrap it around their foot. That's that little Band-Aid looking thing. So that would be, let me get my laser blender. So these are the ones, we can either use them on our fingers ourselves, they stay on long term, or they can go around like the baby's foot to monitor for that. This is an ear probe, finger probe, and then this is one that's going to go probably on the forehead or the nose, looking at this, the looks of this. But these three are going to be the ones that you see most often. These ones, the neonate ones, it'll say neonate. We can use them on adults, especially if they need continuous monitoring. They're expensive though. They're a single patient, so keep that in mind. All right. So quick question here. You go take your client's vital signs and their pulse ox is 88%. What do you do first?
Well,
Emma, reposition them, see if that helps. You can check the telemetry along with their work of breathing to see if it's an accurate read. And then most places have a standing order to start titration of oxygen while you get by the doctor.
I'd also want to know if they had COPD, because an 88% might actually be normal for them, and you don't want to over oxygenate them.
Absolutely. So this is an indication we need a little bit more, but the biggest thing that we can do, let's reposition them. Let's check our connection. Okay, like maybe the probe wasn't on completely, or their fingers are cold. So we need more information. The whole purpose of this is let's not just jump to oxygen right away. Maybe they need to cough, or like mentioned, 88 could be their happy place. You will care for patients where 85, 84. I had one who had such severe respiratory orders or just disorders. Her normal pulse ox was in the low 70s. And she was walkie-talkie, no issues with confusion, nothing. Obviously, it took a lot for her to be walkie-talkie in terms of energy, but most patients, I would be like, oh crap. But that one, it felt a little bit okay. So moral of the story is, let's look at our patient. We treat the patient, not the monitor. All right. Okay. Not like to see there. We're going to get to that later. PFTs, pulmonary function tests. This is another one of those where you need to know what they are. We do PFTs to determine how well their lungs are working. Okay. These are very, very common in our asthmatic patients. They'll get these all the time to see if there's any changes in their breathing status. They can be done by, they're usually done by respiratory therapists or pulmonologists. They breathe into a little thing and they get their numbers and it tells them how well their lungs are working. But it helps us figure out if there are lung diseases present or not. So if somebody is all of a sudden having breathing issues, this will be on the agenda. Or pre-surgery. Why do you think pulmonary function tests would be important before surgery?
To establish their baseline.
Exactly. So we know what to expect when they're done because they're going to get anesthesia and yeah. The big key takeaways with PFTs is what they do. Okay, they tell us if there's lung disease. But then if we have to do teaching, which we do because we're nurses, we don't want you smoking 6 to 8 hours beforehand and no inhalers 4 to 6 hours beforehand. Why wouldn't we want somebody to take their inhaler before they have a PFT done?
Well, don't we want to know the patient's baseline and not how they are with medicine?
100%. So that's why we would avoid the inhaler usage with these. We need to know how they are without the medicine. This is non-invasive. They're literally blowing into something pretty small. It doesn't require too much, but it's a little bit of work because they have to exhale and force themselves to breathe. Compared to a pulse ox, which is just a thing on a finger, PFTs require a little bit more planning and work. So this is probably very, very scary for you guys. I see graphs and charts and FEV1s and all that stuff. Please do not get caught up in all this. You are not a pulmonologist, you are not a respiratory therapist, but these are what they look at. Their FEV1 is going to be like how hard they exhale. Their vital capacity is a formula of how hard you breathe in and how hard you blow out in this thing. I want you to focus. PFTs are used to determine somebody's lung function. Don't smoke, don't use your inhaler. And that's that, okay? It is nice to know what tidal volume is or the vital capacity, but all these little other things, you have bigger fish to fry, my friend. Okay. ABGs. Woohoo, they're back. We don't go over these too far in depth because I know you guys got a lot last semester with these. But ABGs are one of the greatest respiratory assessment diagnostics that we have. It tells us the oxygen level, the acid base level, the carbon dioxide level of the blood. It is the most accurate one that we're going to get in terms of numbers, okay? It is invasive though. Has anybody seen an ABG be done or done one? How'd that go, Micaiah?
I just have seen them and it is a little traumatic to watch. It looks horribly painful and I'm glad that most hospitals, the respiratory therapists do them so that we don't have to.
Yeah, so RT really does do them the most. If you work in the ICU or the emergency department, you'll do them on your own. It is within a nurse's scope of practice to grab an ABG. Basically, they clean around the wrist and they use this artery. They find it. How do you know if it's an artery or a vein?
If it's pulsing?
Absolutely, arteries pulse. So this is how you know you're in the right spot. They clean it, they stick that needle right into the artery, they pull their blood, and then we have to hold pressure. It is more painful. It is definitely more invasive than a blood draw. It's deeper. If somebody requires frequent monitoring of ABGs, they get what's called an art line put in, which is basically like an IV that goes into the artery and allows for more frequent blood draws. So we look at the pH, how acidic their blood is, their O2, their CO2, their bicarb, which helps balance things out. And we go from there. You'll see ABGs, practice questions, exams. If we're doing a respiratory unit, I'm just saying. We don't go into compensated and uncompensated in this class, all right? You need to be able to identify respiratory or metabolic, acidosis or alkalosis, which I know you guys are very well versed in. Certain conditions cause one or the other. That's what we care about. If you saw a pH of 7.2 and CO2 of 56, what would you be thinking?
Respiratory acidosis.
100%. Those are the kind of questions that we're going to ask you. So we also need to know respiratory acidosis, common causes. We are not breathing well, usually due to trauma, central nervous system, something happened that way. COPD and pneumonia, we usually see respiratory acidosis. Alkalosis, that's our hyperventilation, okay? And then our metabolic acidosis, we usually see with diabetes, certain forms of shock, and issues with the kidneys. And then metabolic alkalosis, usually due to prolonged vomiting, that sort of thing. But we're doing respiratory, so we're going to expect respiratory acidosis and alkalosis, right? So there's the procedure if you've never seen that done with the needle going deep down into that artery. We do ABGs again if we are concerned about respiratory status and we need more accurate monitoring. We're also concerned about electrolyte and pH balances. They can also do ABGs if they're determining whether or not to wean somebody off of a ventilator. This is how we can trend as we decrease what's going on. They'll pull blood. Are they tolerating it? Great. Let's lower it some more and see how far we can go. In terms of your role as a nurse, you have to be able to tell the patient what to expect or why we're doing this. So common questions would be, the patient is requiring an arterial blood gas. Which statement by the nurse would be best at teaching the procedure? Okay, can you walk through it or why we do it? We want to know how well you're breathing. Okay. The worst thing that can really happen with an ABG, because we always talk about worst case scenarios, we are kind of doomsday people, nurses. We always got to think about the worst, is a hematoma, a big old at the insertion site. They're not going to bleed out. We're not going to rupture an artery, but we do have to prepare them. Yeah, that you can bleed. I'm going to hold pressure for a while when we come very close. And then I don't like saying things are painful because that scares people, especially with needles. So I try to find a verbiage that it's not the most pleasant test you'll ever have, but it's really important and it's over super quick. So I try to find some positive.
I've heard a lot of RTs explain it as, this is going to be uncomfortable.
There you go. That works very well. Okay, I don't think, oh yeah. There we go. Oh, my bad. The little laser pointer is making my mouse go all wonky. Okay. Okay. So which one would help diagnose hypoxemia? That is going to be that PaO2 of 65. That is another one that'll make me go, "Ruh-roh." It's a lot for me to freak out, which is sometimes a bad thing teaching med surg, because med surg nurses have different criteria, whereas ER nurses are like, whatever. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the imaging, and then we will take another break. So bronchoscopy. This is a really common assessment that can be done. This allows us to get inside their larynx, their trachea, and their bronchi and see what's going on. We can see tissue. We can grab tissue. We can remove foreign objects. So when people swallow things that they're not supposed to, they'll have a bronchoscopy done to help remove whatever there's in their mouth. And we can also, if there's lesions or things like that, we can do a lot with this. There's two different kinds. There's a fiber optic, which is more of like a flexible one. That's your most common. And then there's a rigid one. You'll never have to determine one or the other. It doesn't change in terms of post-op. I hate to use the word post-op. Post-procedure. It more so would be the positioning during it. With a rigid bronchoscopy, it's a very like imagine like a pen going down. So they have to have like their neck kind of open. So it has like a pillow under, or the towel underneath their neck. Whereas fiber optic, it's flexible. It's less concerning. A pillow is fine. With bronchoscopies, we do sedate them. We give them a little fentanyl, maybe a little milk of amnesia, aka propofol, to help kind of like chill them out a little bit, so they don't really remember the whole thing. These aren't overly painful. However, we just stuck something down your throat. Afterwards, what would be a concern of yours?
Sore throat.
Sore throat, okay. Anything else?
Trouble swallowing.
Yeah. Do you have a gag reflex? So after a bronchoscopy, can they swallow safely? Is going to be a major concern. Can they tolerate their secretions, that sort of thing? They were given medications, so we obviously want to watch their oxygen levels as well, but we're very concerned about safety out afterwards. So can they swallow safely? I gotta turn it, okay, I gotta figure that out. So here are some nice pretty pictures of what they see during a bronchoscopy. So this is a normal airway. It bifurcates, right? As we go down the throat, it goes into the two lungs. Here we have, looks like some bleeding, something going on. And then this one, we have some type of obstruction, mucus, who knows what that is. That shouldn't be there, but it would cause respiratory issues. So let's get it out. After a bronchoscopy, some of the things that we see is a potential allergy, usually to the medications that we give them. They're not going to have any issues with the scope, but it's the meds that we give afterwards. And sometimes we give a little too much. Maybe they're opiate naive and, you know, the 50 of fentanyl, which would be normal for most people, snowed them into the high heavens. So we do sometimes see that. So let's watch their oxygen, keep them safe. Guardrails up, you know, bed is positioned, that sort of thing. Infection is also a potential complication, although not overly likely unless we're removing things and can potentially like nick or damage something as well. And then that's where some bleeding would come in with that as well. So we want to make sure that the gag reflex returns before we start giving them anything to eat or drink. And typically they'll start on clear liquids, and if they can tolerate, then we're going to advance. Anytime in this course you see ADAT, that means advanced diet as tolerated. Usually after bronchs, it's really good, quick and painless. We also need to be careful that watching their work of breathing, we can cause bronchospasm. And all that is you ever get like a Charlie horse like in your leg. It's like that. Something triggered something inside like their bronchus. It didn't like it, and it might start like kind of constricting because it was triggered. It was mad. Something touched it that shouldn't have, and it's going to constrict around it. But that's dangerous because then they can't breathe. So we have to watch, make sure that they're breathing okay afterwards as well. And then a pneumothorax, which we talk about more next week, if the lung gets punctured for any reason and deflates, that is a potential complication as well. Very unlikely, but anything is possible. Questions on bronchs? Okay. Your thoracentesis is where we're going to pull fluid from the pleural space. They are awake for this. We sit them up on a bedside table. We have them hunch over. They find where they need to go. The provider numbs up the area, sticks a big needle into that pleural cavity and removes the fluid. It could be pleural fluid. It could be pus, like maybe it's an empyema, a big infection going on, or blood, something along those lines. When there's fluid in that pleural space, the lung can't move the way that it's supposed to, so we're not breathing well. So the thoracentesis will help remove that immediately, and then maybe we can fix the problem so it doesn't come back. So this is more of an emergency situation type thing. Like, we are not breathing. We did an X-ray. We see it's full of blood. Let's drain it out right away. It's quick. It's easy. Why would they do a thoracentesis over a chest tube? That's a provider preference, or maybe something else going on, because I knew somebody was going to ask. So with this, afterwards, we really just want to prevent infection, keep them comfortable, and monitor them, because we're sticking a needle in their chest. So during this, we want to keep them as still as possible. They can remove up to 1 liter during a thoracentesis. We don't want to remove too much more of that because we can cause a disturbance with fluid shift balance and can cause a collapsed lung. But afterwards, we just want to watch and make sure that there's a dressing in place. We don't have too much like oozing out, like a whole massive like leaking of something. A little drainage is normal, a whole lot is not. Things that can go wrong with the thoracentesis: collapsed lung, bleeding, infection. We pierce the skin, obviously we're at risk for infection. And then a mediastinal shift, and that has to do with air. We pulled out too much. It's pulling something. It's a tension pneumothorax, basically, that we would just have to look for. Everything should be nice and in alignment afterwards. They may or may not take that fluid then and send it to the lab for further evaluation. Your role as a nurse is to know, what is a thoracentesis? Why do we do it? And then if you are assisting with these, what supplies do you need? And then afterwards, what are we looking for? We're looking to make sure that they're breathing okay, that their oxygen levels are great, that they're not bleeding all over the place, that sort of thing. And again, they're awake for this. Those can be done at the bedside too. If all of a sudden we have a spontaneous thing that we need to do that for, they'll absolutely do it at the bedside. Cultures. What do you think are some of the most common cultures that you would do or obtain?
Throat.
Strep throat, 100%.
Urine.
Okay.
COVID swab.
Yep, I was waiting for somebody to say that one. Flu swab, anything like that. So we have different kinds of cultures. We're referring to respiratory cultures. We can grab blood, we can grab urine, but we're talking about the respiratory ones: the throat, the nose, the nasopharyngeal, the ones that make you feel like we're going straight up into your brain. But these help us diagnose things like strep, staph, flu, COVID. The important thing with cultures, no matter what culture it is, blood, urine, boogers, it doesn't matter. We need to make sure we get that before we are giving them any type of antibiotics. it kind of defeats the purpose then. So if they're like, yep, this is a UTI, we're going to get a culture to confirm, get the culture before you start the antibiotics. Okay. The antibiotics might change based off of the culture, but yeah, we want to make sure we get all the buggies. So depending on what kind of culture you're getting, it might look like a Q-tip, like the long red one here. We use those for wounds or even strep throat. They'll tickle the back of your throat with it. But then you have the real like liquidy pliable ones that go way up in there, a little bit different. Depending on what culture you're getting is going to determine which one you're getting. There's anaerobic and aerobic. Your lab person or lab manual, wherever you work, will tell you exactly which swab you need. There's not a universal like, oh yeah, it's the red one, because your hospital might use orange ones. It depends on the manufacturer, but yeah, the key takeaways, this isn't pleasant.
Yeah, my son once, when he was little tiny, watched his dad get one of the nasal cultures and ran out to me going, "They shoved a shovel up Dad's nose."
Oh. One of the tricks of the trade that I've learned is that anytime I'm doing anything with inserting something, usually into the nose, I have my patient sit on their hands. Because if you come at me with a swab, the number one instinct is they're going to smack at you to get it away. But if they're sitting on their hands, it's a little bit more difficult for them to do that. So, all right, sputum cultures. That is exactly what it sounds like. Let's hock up a loogie into a cup. I don't want your spittle. I want the mucus. So sputum studies will help us identify organisms, usually with pneumonia, but they can also help us in certain types of cancers that they can do that for. These can be difficult to obtain. The best time to do them is usually in the morning when you first wake up. We've all been there in the morning when you wake up and you have a good cough and you can like clear things out because everything settles when we sleep. So in the morning is the best time before they've had anything to eat or drink. There's a sterile cup that comes with it, just like a urine specimen cup. Sometimes you'll see the little container sitting on the bedside in the patient's room because we're not going to sit there for hours waiting for it, but we need that sample to help us identify treatment. We just want a good deep cough, like really get that gook out. We don't want the spit bubbles. We want the gross stuff. Chest x-ray. We know chest x-rays. This is like our gold standard. This is probably the #1 respiratory test, like picture test out there. We know this. So chest x-rays help us identify fluid in the lungs, air in the lungs, anything that's not normal. Our key teaching points, we try to avoid them in pregnancy, and if we absolutely have to, we shield them as much as possible. We want to use the lead aprons on our patients and ourselves over the thyroid, ovaries, and testicles. Let's protect those baby making parts. Okay, we don't want to expose them to more radiation. Most of those shields too have like a little, if you work in imaging, you get like a little detector to help you identify like how much radiation you've been exposed to. Get out of the room if you don't need to be. The keys with x-rays, especially with chest x-rays, is we want them to take a deep breath, inhale, and hold it. And then they snap the picture while they're holding the breath. That's the image that they want that's going to give us the best image of what's going on. We're not going to test you and say, okay, what does this chest x-ray show? But we want you to eventually just be comfortable and say, okay, I see the heart, or it looks normal. This is a normal one. This is great. But we're not going to put 4 x-rays up there and say, hey, what is this? No. No metal. We want them to take off all jewelry and metal when we're taking pictures. You might have seen some x-rays. We can even see the EKG leads. No nipple rings, all that stuff, belly button rings can all be shown. That needs to come out. Otherwise, it glows on the picture. It is important for both yourself as a nurse and your patient is that we want this to go quickly. We don't want to expose ourselves for too long, keeping our distance if we need to. and wearing our shields. These are important safety factors that need to be taken into consideration. Again, the chest x-ray, you probably, I would say there's what, 39 of you here. I'd guess about half of you have probably had one at some point in your life. They don't hurt. Ideally, we want them standing, but we can also with them laying down. We see more with the standing than we do any other way. And we can do them at the bedside. Pictures aren't as good, but they're good. CT scan. So a CT scan allows us to see more than an x-ray. It gives us the better visualization with this of the tissues. We can do contrast with this. It is important if your patient is getting a CT with contrast that we assess their allergies. If they have allergic reactions to shellfish or iodine, that's an issue. Does that mean that we're not going to do the CT scan with contrast? It depends on what the allergy is. Whenever somebody says, when you ask about allergies, they'll say, oh yeah, I'm allergic to Tylenol. Okay, so what happens? We have to know what happens when they have it, because the benefits might outweigh the risk. And sometimes allergies are not allergies, they're side effects. Ibuprofen hurts my stomach. It's not an allergy, that's a side effect. So if it is an actual like allergy, we might treat you beforehand to offset those allergies if it's something that is like benefit outweighs the risk. But we do need to make sure that we're assessing for any type of allergy if contrast is being used. Contrast can either be oral or IV. The oral contrast, we really want you NPO beforehand. They swallow this gross liquid and they light up. And then IV, well, it goes to the IV. CT scans, we try to avoid in pregnancy as well. I don't know why morbid obesity is considered contraindicated. It's more difficult to see things. More and more imaging scanners, both CT scans and MRIs, are more geared up to like 1,000 pounds, so it's not so much of a contraindication anymore. The biggest issue that we have is that they have to lay supine, so they're on their back, and they have to stay still. So if they are very large, it might affect their breathing, but CT scans are pretty quick. Like it's only a couple of minutes. MRIs, that's a lot longer. So.
And don't you have to warn people like when you're getting the contrast that you're going to, because I've had this done, you're going to feel all warm all over and it's like, you're not wetting your pants. This is just normal. And yeah, I haven't had, there's been people that have had this done and they don't warn them and they're like, oh no, I'm peeing my pants.
Yes, 100% awesome point. Yeah, it feels, I haven't had it done, but I've had patients say it's like, oh my God, I think I just peed. And the CT tech's like, no, it's just the contrast, you're okay. And they like want to look and make sure that they didn't wet themselves, but yeah. MRIs are the other imaging. Guys, I've only seen MRIs done in respiratory issues if we're really concerned about cancer and staging. If somebody's having a lung issue, this is not where we're going. We're doing X-ray, we're doing CT, we're doing PFTs, but an MRI uses magnets and radio frequency to gather these images. They are extremely detailed. Like it is the most detailed imaging that we possibly have, and they can do contrast with this. The downside to MRIs is that A, they are very expensive. B, they are very time consuming. They take like 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what they're scanning. And you have to lay completely still in a very tiny space. And that doesn't always work well for people. So they do have more and more open MRIs that allow for a little bit more room for people to go, but it's not for everybody. If there's any metal present, it will rip it out. So hidden piercings, some old jailhouse tattoos that might have like different metals embedded in it. I've seen it like leach out of the skin and it's bad. We want no metal, none whatsoever. So if they have metal implants, it may be contraindicated in them. Some of the devices will be okay, and that truly depends on what they are and where they are and the machine. I challenge you the next time you're at clinical, ask to see their MRI checklist. And it goes through what they have to ask the patients, what they want removed, all that sort of stuff. It's really interesting. And facilities kind of differ because, again, it depends on their machinery, but it's helpful. It is also very loud, so earplugs or headphones may be beneficial to them. But if they have claustrophobia or they're overly anxious, this may not be the best thing for them. They might have to go outsource it to a open MRI place. But the things you can see, my goodness. Again, respiratory wise, maybe if they're staging, but this is, I think, more commonly done. Spinal cord, knees, joints, hips, brains, that sort of stuff. Fluoro. So fluoroscopy is like an X-ray video. Images get taken, and oops, this YouTube. Go through and watch this little video, but basically it helps us insert things because it's like live motion. So you may hear something like, oh, they need an NG tube put in under fluoro. It's just imaging to help them see where they're guiding it. It is going to be with the movement of the tissues and what's going on, and it helps with certain invasive procedures like an NG tube, or sometimes some intubations, that sort of thing. Fluoroscopy is done in interventional radiology. So unless you're an IR nurse, you're not doing this, but it's important to know that like we have this available and this is what they're talking about. But usually, yeah, NG tubes, some barium swallow studies to help look at how things are going with the swallowing, if there's issues, or even some lumbar punctures where they're going into the spine can be done with this as well. It's pretty cool. It's just moving pictures to help move things in. All right, let's do a quick poll question. All right, I'm going to end this. So, which one is the least invasive? That's going to be our pulse ox. Yes, an X-ray isn't not invasive, but there's radiation and exposure, so it's more invasive than a pulse ox. And the swab, well, if you've ever been swabbed, you know that that's not the most pleasant thing in the whole wide world. So pulse ox doesn't hurt. All right. Where are we at here for time? It is 12 o'clock your time, correct? Right clock? Okay. Let's go ahead and take another break here, 10 minutes. I will see you guys back at 12:10.
know what you're doing. I see it all too clear. I only taste the same. I kiss away your tears. You really had me going. Wishing on a star. The black holes that surround you. I envy you by far. I believed in your confusion. So completely torn. It must have been that yesterday was the day that I was born. There's not much to examine, nothing left to hide. You really can't be serious. You have to ask me why. I say goodbye. 'Cause I am barely breathing, and I can't find the air. Don't know who I'm kidding, imagining you care. And I could stand here waiting, move on another day. Don't suppose it was the price, it was the price that I was paying. Everyone keeps asking, what's it all about? It used to be so certain, and I can't figure out what is their subtraction. I only feel my pain, nothing left to reason, and only you to blame. Will it ever change? 'Cause I am barely breathing, and I can't find the air. Don't know who I'm kidding, imagining you care. And I could stand here waiting, move for another day. Don't suppose it was the price, it was the price that I would pay. But I'm thinking it over anyway. I'm thinking it over anyway.
dokie. Yeah, in case you didn't notice, I'm a little bit extra and I like to theme music as much as I can based off of what we're talking about. So if you have other breathing songs, send them my way. Okay, where are we at here? Did I close it? I sure did. My bad. All right. 2 seconds to get caught back up. All right. You guys doing okay? Pace is all right. I have a tendency to talk like fast, so. All right, let's talk about the big bad scary thing of the semester or the week, chest tubes. So I know you guys had some work with chest tubes, I think last semester in lab or something like that. We're going to go into it a little bit more. The biggest issue people have with chest tube questions is not understanding bubbling versus titling and what's okay and what's not. So I'm going to try to break this down for you as best as I can. So chest tubes, these allow for either air or fluid to come out of the pleural space. So fluid could be blood, it could be pus, it could be pleural fluid, or just air from like a spontaneous pneumothorax. It gets it out. The fluid in the air compresses on the lung, allowing for it not to do its job. So we need to get that out of there. Chest tubes are typically set to water seal. And what that means is it's not really connected to anything. The water pressure inside of the container is really what's going to help offset the negative pressure and drain things out. This allows air from going back into the pleural space. So we got the tube with the eyelets shoved into the lung, and that water seal is going to prevent air from going back in. It's going to let it come out, but not go back in. Titling, this is an expected finding in the water seal. So I'm talking, let me get my laser pointer out. Down here in the bottom little container, that's where we're going to see titling. And titling is just a wave, okay? If there is no titling, it means that the lung has expanded or potentially there's an obstruction. How can I tell? Because there's going to be other things going on as well. We can either reposition or we can look, but we want titling. Titling is a good thing. If there is an air leak, we will have intermittent or frequent bubbling in that water seal. Some bubbling is normal. When we inhale, there might be a couple of bubbles, okay? But continuous bubbling is an issue. Bubbling here and there, not so much. We'll continue to monitor. So bubbles mean that there is an air leak. If there's an air leak, we can check the connection between the tube and the patient, or the container and the tubing, or if it's loose, something like that. If it is continuous bubbling, we need to notify a provider because air is leaking out and it's not supposed to. So, titling. That water seal chamber is going to rise and fall, and you're going to see that when they're taking deep breaths, okay? So them breathing in and exhaling is what's causing that water to move. If there's an air leak, then we have those bubbles. A couple of bubbles, not so big of a deal. We'll continue to monitor. Lots of bubbles, that's an issue. So intermittent and frequent bubbling is an issue. Couple of bubbles, not so bad. Or even tiny bubbles. Isn't that a song? If all of a sudden we don't have titling, it just stops, we have to look to make sure that the tube is not blocked or kinked. We don't strip chest tubes, but sometimes clots get formed in there, so we'd have to notify somebody, or sometimes it gets pinched. People pinch things off. So Titling is good. Lots of bubbling is bad. All right.
So is titling the fact that the water is just kind of moving like this, or that there's water in there?
The
Like-
titling is actually moving. So think about like water waves, tidal waves, how the water moves. We want that. And that happens when we're inhaling and exhaling. And then bubbles is an air leak. So chest tubes, sorry, this is kind of off the screen here. Chest tubes are inserted usually due to either a collapsed lung or blood or fluid in that pleural space, okay? A pneumothorax is air, hemothorax is blood. We go into that again next week. Sometimes they'll have like a thoracic surgery and a chest tube will be put in to help remove drainage, or pleural fluid, or an empyema, which is pus. This is not a pleasant experience, okay? They cut that intercostal space and they shove that tube into where it needs to go. It is violent and it is sore. Your patient is going to have pain afterwards. So before a chest tube is inserted, we medicate them and potentially sedate them. Not always. In trauma, we might not have time. We need to expand that lung or drain stuff out. Sorry, gotta go. But if it's planned or something like that, then we do. During insertion, we want to watch their vital signs. We're looking for any changes in their pulse ox. We don't want their oxygen levels to drop. They're in pain. What vital sign changes would we see with somebody in pain?
Heart rate and blood pressure.
100%. And we're going to see that. Afterwards, we want to keep watching their vital signs. We want to make sure that they're breathing okay, that their pulse is coming down, that sort of thing. One of the key things we need to teach patients with chest tubes is cough and deep breathing. Cough and deep breathing is one of those interventions where a lot of the times that's actually the answer to our questions because it does so much. The chest tube hurts, okay? So taking deep breaths can be very painful. If it hurts to breathe, they're not going to take really good breaths. If they're not taking really good breaths, what potential complication could happen? Starts with an A.
Atelectasis.
Atelectasis. So even though the chest tube is help draining stuff, the lungs, they still need to expand and work. And if they don't, that atelectasis can form, leading to other pulmonary complications. So it's kind of like how one little thing can just trigger a series of events. And we have to understand what can happen if this doesn't get done. There are medications that can help with muscle relaxation to help with chest tubes. So that is also something that can also be done as well. I was going to say something else and now I'm having a brain fart. It'll come to me. Vital signs, pain, chest tubes. It'll come to me. So the big bad scary things that can happen. We talked about air leaks a little bit. We have air is escaping or getting into somewhere where it's not supposed to. It could be the tubing. It could be that the secure where we tape is not secure enough, or that there's still air left over. We don't stop a chest tube or take it out because there is an air leak, okay? Small air leaks, we continue to monitor. Big ones, we may need to do something about, and we would definitely notify them. But it's important to understand that just because there's an air leak doesn't mean we're going to take out the chest tube. We need to look at this situation as a whole. This video isn't popping up. I really want you to watch this on your own time. It's very quick, but it's going to explain to you the bubbling and the titling. And it's a visual, so you can see what's expected and what's not. I don't think... Oh, wait. Just kidding. Oh, for Pete's sake.
I can turn anyone into a beach bum.
Good for you.
As with any chest drainage system, the drain must be placed below the level of the patient's chest and kept in an upright position to maximize drainage efficiency. All patient tubes and suction connections should be routinely checked to ensure proper leak-proof operation and chest tube patency. Depending upon your hospital's preferred sampling technique, samples of drainage fluid can be taken directly from the patient tube by forming a temporary dependent loop and inserting a 20 gauge or smaller needle with syringe at a shallow angle. On selected models, samples can be taken directly from the needleless Lure-Lock sampling port located on the patient tube connector. A water seal is a simple one-way valve which allows air to exit the chest and prevents air from returning to the patient under normal conditions. It's also a very useful diagnostic tool as it can show even the smallest trends of an air leak, as well as changes in intrathoracic pressure. Assessing patient air leaks is easy with Atrium's Blue Tint Water and Air Leak Monitor. Continuous bubbling observed in the water seal will confirm a persistent air leak in either the patient's thoracic cavity or possible tube connections. Intermittent bubbling with gentle float ball oscillation will confirm the presence of an intermittent air leak. And no bubbling with minimal float ball oscillation at the bottom of the water seal indicates that no air leak is present. Bubbling from right to left in the air leak monitor must be present to confirm an active air leak. When monitoring a chest drainage system, it's important to maintain constant gentle suction control bubbling and to periodically check and adjust the water levels in both the suction control chamber and water seal during system operation as required. In the event of an accidental knockover, place the drain in an upright position immediately and check for interchamber spillover and correct fluid levels. Both suction control and water seal fluid levels may be adjusted as necessary.
Okay, so hopefully the bubbling kind of makes a little bit more sense now with that video. A lot of it, that's an issue. A little bit, not so bad. Look at your verbiage when you're looking at test questions or practice questions. What word are they using to define the bubbles? Okay. There's a longer video too that you guys can look up from Atrium on YouTube. It's like 16 minutes, but it's actually really informative because it goes through the whole process from start to finish of insertion and everything and then removal. So it's actually really, it's pretty cool. I know 16 minutes is a long time for a video. So okay, so if somebody has a chest tube, what assessments would you want to do on your patient?
Pain level.
Absolutely.
You'd want to check like where it's at and make sure there's no air or anything in like or where the tube's inserted and make sure the skin's like okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback off of that. Who knows what crepitus is?
Isn't that air trapped just beneath the skin?
Yep, 100%. Subcutaneous emphysema or crepitus. When we are inserting a chest tube, crepitus around the insertion site is a normal finding because we just cut open skin and shove something in there. If the crepitus expands and like reaches way far out or is hours later, that's not so good. So upon insertion, I expect some crepitus around the insertion site, but further in and later on, not so much. That means we got air getting in somewhere into that tissue, okay? So don't get confused. Yeah, usually it's like, ooh, it's not so much of a good thing, but with that, it would be in that instance. And it feels and sounds like Rice Krispies when you actually touch it. It's really weird. Cool, I like it. I don't like it, but you know what I mean. Every person that has a chest tube should have certain equipment at their bedside. Sterile water, an occlusive dressing, hemostats, absolutely positively. My old unit had a lot of chest tubes, and every patient that had a chest tube, we had little bags that would go into the patient's room with those supplies. So as soon as they're coming up from the ER or the OR with their chest tube, as we're coming into the room to set it up, that bag would be in there, because if it accidentally gets dislodged, we have steps that we're going to take. So if the chest tube comes out of the insertion site, the first thing that we're going to do is stick that tube into sterile water. Okay. Then we're going to cover that dressing or cover that hole with that occlusive dressing. And then we have to notify the provider. I know it sounds weird. You're like, why aren't we telling them right away? Because in the time that it takes to notify the provider, we could have done that other stuff, and that's more threatening. So we have to fix the patient first and then notify them, if that makes sense. So the occlusive dressing, usually some type of like Vaseline gauze over the insertion site, and then we tape it on 3 sides. Why 3 sides? Why not all 4? Anybody know?
So that you can still burp the dressing so you're not creating a tension pneumo.
Absolutely. If we close it all in, we're going to push things down and it can cause the lung to actually collapse. So with chest tubes, when we remove it or it gets removed, we tape it on 3 sides. Which 3 sides? It really does not matter. That is your personal preference. As long as one side is open, you're good to go. If we are planning on removing the chest tube like it's scheduled, the provider usually writes for pain medication to be given beforehand. So let's get them nice and medicated. And then they'll remove the stitches around the chest tube if they're present. They tell the patient to bear down, which is basically squeeze like you have to poop. And then they'll remove it. They will cover it with that dressing. They'll get a chest x-ray and we watch for drainage. So typically, and it can be the cardiothoracic doctor, the surgeon, NPs and PAs can also remove chest tubes too. So always use the term provider. Get away from using doctor. Okay, more and more places are using multidisciplinaries, and yeah.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
When you put the free end of the chest tube in the sterile water, why doesn't that like continue, like when the patient breathes, why doesn't that sterile water go all the way up the chest tube? Is it just way too long, that kind of thing, and that's why it works like that?
Because the tube that came out of the patient, it's the tip that was inside the patient that came out. So nothing's in the patient anymore.
Oh, gotcha.
Putting that part into the water. And we put it into the sterile water in case we need to reinsert it.
Okay.
So it keeps it as clean as possible. Because sometimes we don't keep chest tube kits in clean utility on units. They come from the OR. So getting a new one can be a big issue. So another thing you need to look for that I forgot to mention is when we're looking at output, the stuff that's coming out, if it's fluid, because not all chest tubes are for fluid, but if it's draining fluid, we keep track, right? We draw a little line, we put how much there is and the initials and all that. If all of a sudden, like your drain has been giving you 200 cc's like every 2 hours, and all of a sudden I have 1,000, if there's a big change, either a whole lot more or nothing, that is also something we need to report. If we have an increase in drainage, we might have a bleed somewhere. And if we have nothing, we might have an obstruction as well. And then we would see the cessation of the titling as well. So how are we feeling about the chest tubes? Okay. Let's do a quick poll question here. I hope you never have to have a chest tube as a patient. I had a motorcycle accident guy that had 3. That was a lot. All right, almost everybody answered, and guess what? 100%, we are removing air or fluid from the pleural space. Woohoo! We're not going to add anything, but yeah. All right. Let's go on to our management of respiratory issues. Some of this stuff is going to sound really hokey and really like hippy dippy. We want to do things when we do interventions from least invasive to most invasive. Let's not forget our basics, like breathing exercises. I know it sounds like very like, oh, I don't know, home remedy-ish or something, but no. We forget how to breathe sometimes. High stress situations or anxiety kicks in. We can reset our own breathing cycle. So we want to do breathing exercises. I've seen stuff with like breathing like a square where I don't know. There's all sorts of different things that we can do out there, but it will help the patient. Do you know what won't help the patient who can't breathe? What 2 words?
You're fine.
Okay, those are 2 words, not the ones I was thinking of, but yes.
breathe.
Keep trying.
Calm down.
Calm down. I know I'm the type of person where if you tell me to calm down, I'm going to do the complete opposite and probably explode on you.
Just smile.
So if there's a lot of stress going on, let's work on breathing. And they might look at you like you have 2 heads, and that's okay. But if we focus on the breathing, it can help with reducing stress and reduce that air hunger that they might be having, or even if they're having a lot of pain. So we want them to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it helps. Smell the flowers, blow out the birthday candles. That's how I help get them like back into centered, okay? When they're blowing out the birthday candles, we want them to do pursed-lipped breathing, like our COPDers. Pursed-lipped breathing allows us to control the air that we are exhaling. So we're going to have a prolonged exhalation time, and that's okay because we're trying to like reboot things. Or things like the tripod breathing where we, like lean forward and things like that. If we focus on breathing, we're not focused on the other problems. So it helps. Distraction is a very real thing. So keep that in mind. If we need to give oxygen, we have a couple different ways that we can do that. So oxygen therapy is when we're giving patients oxygen at a higher concentration than what they're breathing in through normal air, okay? So the stuff that they get through a mask or the nasal cannula is a higher concentration of oxygen. High, and that doesn't mean high flow, it's just higher concentration. Flow is something like how fast they're getting it. Hypoxemia can lead to hypoxia. So if we have issues with oxygen levels in the blood, it's going to lead to low oxygen levels in the tissue. There is a difference between the two. When caring for somebody with oxygen, we want to do, again, as least to little as possible. So we want the lowest amount of oxygen possible in the least invasive form of administration. So what mask are we using or whatnot? It is important that people on oxygen therapy, that we look at their skin integrity, because those masks and things can damage the skin, can cause issues inside the nose, breakdown, irritation, bloody noses, and then their mouth. For whatever reason, patients in the hospital neglect their oral cavity. I don't know why. If you've ever cared for a patient for more than like 3 days, there's a good chance that they have not brushed their teeth the entire time. I cannot tell you why, but they don't. But sometimes the oxygen mask as well, like that kind of hinders things. And so it truly depends, but things that we need to look at. With high flow oxygen, so if they're getting like 6 liters, we might add some humidity to that. So we'll attach a thing of water to the oxygen tubing to allow moisture, because oxygen is very drying and can cause cracks and bleeding. So we use oxygen in urgent situations, shortness of breath, per a provider order. If there's cyanosis, it's just an emergency. Most places have standard orders for O2. Like it's in their order set that you can apply it. Technically, Okay, I want you to understand this though. Oxygen is a medication and it does require a provider's order. So if you are applying oxygen because your patient's pulse ox is 78 and stuff isn't working, you're not wrong. We just have to get an order for it as well. Am I going to stop what I'm doing to get said order? In the real world, no. And also, if you're doing NCLEX style questions, and if the question says like, do this, give that med, do this, if it's in your answers, you have an order for it, okay? So I don't want you to sit there and think, okay, well, I would apply the oxygen, but only if it says with doctor's orders. No, if it's listed as an answer, you have an order for it. Which one is the one that you would do first, if that makes sense? All right, so looking at our oxygen delivery systems, some of these you'll see, some of these you'll never see. It truly depends on where you work. But we all know the nasal cannula, right? That's this bad boy right here. There are two kinds, actually. There is a green one, which is more meant for high flow, but the nasal cannula goes into the nose. It is the best for oxygen, 1 to 6 liters-ish. If they need more, they have the green one that they could use, but it keeps their mouth open and allows for more independence and more freedom. We have to watch the nares and behind the ears. They make little foam pieces that go on the ears so we prevent skin breakdown, because I've seen some nasty pressure ulcers from oxygen tubing. Make sure that it is inserted in the patient correctly. What do I mean? It's a nasal cannula. How can you screw that up?
The prongs need to go down instead of up.
You would not believe the number of times you'll see people looking it upside down. Check placement is a good thing. We have an oxygen mask. This is anywhere between 5 and 8 liters. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're using the right method for what we're using. Okay, if they need a lot of oxygen, a nasal cannula is not where we're going to need to go. But if they only need 2 liters, it's probably going to be our best bet. The Venturi mask is this fun little guy right here, and this can go up to 12 liters. This I've only seen, this is me though, I've seen it, a patient in the ICU on it, and then a kid. But there's different adapters that can help with adjusting the concentration and whatnot. But it's going to deliver a steady, consistent, high flow oxygen and high concentration oxygen. So with these other ones, it's not as controlled because it's the equipment that it is, but this one is going to control the best with flow and oxygen concentration. We lose a little bit in the other ones. Our non-rebreather mask has that bag attached to it. It helps with control. This is also what we use most often if somebody can't breathe in trauma, or they're starting to code or go into respiratory distress. High flow with this as well. And then we have some other things going on. Oops. We have the CPAP mask and the CPAP machine used for sleep apnea. It creates a seal, forces the airway open, and then allows somebody to breathe. There's also BiPAP, which is a little bit more invasive, also used for similar things like sleep apnea, or if somebody doesn't want to be intubated. And then we have a ventilator. Ventilators will look different at every facility that you work at or do clinicals at, or if you ever see one, there's not one standard one, they're all different. The endotracheal tube, and then this is another example of an oxygen flow system, just to kind of show you what's all out there. Remember with oxygen, it is a med, skin assessments, lowest possible way that we can give it. And we have to be careful because we can get too much oxygen. All right. Okay. Incentive spirometry. This should be very well ingrained in you by the time you leave nursing school. Okay. Incentive spirometry is exercise for your lungs. The most important thing with IS is teaching. Okay. We tell the patient this is how we do it, and this is why we do it, and this is how often we do it. Okay. So we want the patient sitting upright. at least semi-Fowlers, okay? And we want to take good deep breaths. We put our mouth around the mouthpiece and then we inhale. When we inhale, this stuff is going to start to rise. This little piece on the side is going to raise up. And then this bottom piece is going to also raise up. There'll be a goal for the patient within the order set, depending on your patient. Maybe we want them at 2000 with every breath. It truly depends, but we inhale. The biggest issue I see with nurses or nursing students is they forget, or the patient forgets. Pardon the French, do I suck or do I blow? Okay, this is a straw. Look at it like a big bendy straw. What do we do with straws? We use them to get our drink out, right? So that's how I tell patients to remember. We don't want you to blow, we want you to inhale, okay? So just think of it like a big crinkly straw. It is important because it will help prevent atelectasis. 10 times an hour while awake. I like to tell my patients, do it during commercial break, during your soap operas or whatever you're watching. It's the easiest way, not missing anything. We do it as best as they can, and it might take a while, but this is important for them to do. All right, and I don't have a poll question for this one, so. Our nebulizers. These are our breathing treatments, guys. If you've ever seen somebody get a breathing treatment like albuterol through a mask or a little handheld thing, that's what they're talking about. We usually use this with our asthma patients or even some of our shortness of breath patients. It's usually a bronchodilator medication that's put into there, which will help open up those airways, relax the smooth muscles, and allow for airflow. The important thing with the nebulizers is education. Why do you have it? Why do you need it? And then making sure that we're doing things properly. So albuterol, or you might hear it called a duo neb. That's albuterol and ipratropium bromide. It's two meds, duo, that's why. And it just helps with breathing. We want to make sure that the containers that the medication goes in, which is this little thing right there, gets rinsed out afterwards. When you put the medication, it comes in like a little thing like this big. You pop open the top, you squirt it in, you seal it up. This gets connected to oxygen. Once the oxygen kicks on, you get that mist, and that's what they're going to be inhaling for about 7 to 10 minutes. And then when there's no more mist, we're all done. They do have little ones, like little machines like this that people might have at home. So they don't have to be connected to oxygen per se, but their tubing gets connected. The machine generates the oxygen to allow for that medication to be dispersed. It says it's smoking when it's working. It kind of just looks like, if you've ever been to like a haunted house or seen like fake fog, it kind of looks like that. That's what we got. Those can be done at home. So maybe you guys have kids that have asthma. Maybe they have one of those and you've seen them, or in long-term care, that sort of thing. All right. So non-invasive positive pressure ventilation. That's a lot of words for CPAP and BiPAP. That's what this is talking about. CPAP is that continuous positive airway pressure that keeps the airways open while you're sleeping. So with sleep apnea, things get occluded and people will stop breathing. Apnea means not breathing. That mask forces the airway open. In very severe cases, BiPAP might be necessary because it's more invasive, or it could be a precursor to intubation. CPAP can either have this little nose plug looking thing, or even one that goes more around the face. They're making them more bedroom friendly. One of the biggest issues of non-compliance is it might be uncomfortable to have the partner have to listen to the machine. People don't like wearing it. They want their intimate time with their partner and it gets in the way. So there's a lot of issues why people don't wear it. But if they don't wear it, they can die. Point blank. I don't know how many of you guys are football fans, but Reggie White was a great defensive player for the Green Bay Packers, and that's how he died, with sleep apnea. He fell asleep and he basically, that's how he died. So CPAP and BiPAP, again, they really do the same thing, but BiPAP is more invasive and it's bi-level. It's going to open up the nose and the mouth. So it's a bigger mask. That's what it comes down to. Okay. Where's my work? Sorry. All right. So we're going to get into two. Okay. I want to actually come back to that. I'm going to skip the respiratory failure for just a second. Okay. Mechanical ventilation is, it's when we tube somebody. You are connected to a machine. The machine is doing all the work for you. This can be because of a compromised airway from trauma, a neurological issue where you can't breathe on your own anymore, other respiratory issues, but basically a tube gets put down your throat and you are connected to a machine to breathe. This is life support. This is severe. This isn't something we jump to willy-nilly, okay? With this comes the intubation, which is done through an ET tube. Intubation can be done by a doctor, a CRNA, a respiratory therapist, and some like acutely trained nurses, like flight nurses and things along those lines. With this, when somebody's intubated, the important thing is to gather the supplies, your ET tube, the CO2 detector to make sure we're in the right spot. And then we verify with chest x-ray. So the patient is laying supine, they expose their vocal cords, they'll use like a scope to help visualize, they get that tube down where they're supposed to go, the thing will turn yellow and they know they're in the right spot, they'll connect them to the machine while they're being bagged at the same time, and that will breathe for the patient. The goal with mechanical ventilation is to obviously breathe for the patient to keep them alive, but we don't want them on it forever. So there'll be trials to try to wean them and get them off of the ventilator as tolerated. If we cannot wean somebody with an endotracheal tube within like 2 weeks, they'll do a tracheostomy. They'll do a surgical incision, insert a trach, and then connect the ventilator to the trach. The ET tube is not meant for long-term intubation. If they can't wean them, then we take other steps. With ventilators and ET tubes, we have to look at positioning. Okay, is everything in the right spot? We want to prevent pneumonia, so we're doing oral cares, suctioning, that sort of thing. We'll go into that a little bit more as well. Patients that are intubated are typically also sedated, but not always. Sometimes people are awake. I've seen people walking down hallways ventilated. Not everybody can do that. There's some like neurological studies that they're doing, trying to keep people more awake during their healing process. It truly depends on the patient and their condition and what's going on, but not everybody in the ICU that's intubated is sleeping, is basically what I'm getting at. Again, we don't dive too far into ventilators and intubations because it's more of a specialty area and you won't see this unless you're in the ER, ICU, or the OR. Patients with ET tubes are not on regular med-surg floors, except in like maybe like the pandemic, and that's something very specific, out of the ordinary. So when somebody has an ET tube, we want to make sure that we're looking at their mouth. We can intubate somebody through the nose, through the mouth, and I've even seen cases of them doing it through the eye. So granted that person didn't have an eye, but they can go and get in however they need to. Oral is preferred because it's less likely to get infected. It's the easiest and the patient tolerates it the best. Afterwards, again, oral care, suctioning, we can reposition the tube so we can just kind of move it from side to side as needed to prevent pressure. But once the tube is placed in, it's inflated like a Foley. So we can potentially not get it dislodged. It absolutely can, especially if they're all spry and freaking out, they can rip it out, but we want to prevent that from happening as well. So the big bad scary things that can happen with ET tubes is pneumonia. That's one of the things that we want to prevent is ventilator acquired pneumonia. So if they are on a vent, that they're making sure that their oxygen is humidified, we suction, we watch their skin integrity. If they need to change the tape or the dressings, making sure we're doing that as well, keeping them hydrated. That sounds odd. We're talking about an ET tube. Why do I care about how their hydration status is? Adequate hydration thins secretions. We tell people when they're sick, we want you to drink fluids, and it's not just to keep you hydrated, but it helps with the removal of the secretions. So making sure that they're getting what they need. And then making sure that their oxygen levels are good and their oxygen settings are correct as well. In terms of suctioning, again, don't go into it too much because it's specialized and you might never care for somebody who's intubated. There's two different kinds. This is a nice to know thing. A closed suction where they stick something into the tube, and yeah, this is a nice to know, but we can absolutely suction ET tubes. Trachs are something that you've probably already encountered or have seen more frequently. And this is a surgical incision that is created into the trachea and then the tube is stuck inside there. This is not always forever. Some people will get this temporarily placed and then they're doing well, they recover, and then they're fine. It truly depends on the condition and what's going on and the reason for it being placed. Some cancer patients, it will be forever. Sometimes after trauma, it's just for a little bit. Then with trachs, we have the different pieces. You got the flange, which is that little plastic piece that kind of covers it. You have the shaft, and then you have the cuff, and then the distal tip. So that gets inserted into the stoma, and you're good to go. Again, if they need to be intubated for more than 14 days, they can do this temporarily, but it's the same thing as if it was permanent. They're going to cut through that cartilage and create that hole. I would recommend, you guys did a trach sign-off last semester. Look at that sheet just for giggles to remember procedures as to what we would do. We hyperoxygenate. When we suction, right? We give them O2 and we stick the suction in, pull it out. We wait how long before passes. Reacquaint yourself with it. Again, when you get into practice, you might never suction a patient ever again. I worked on a floor where I had a respiratory therapist and they did all the suctioning, and it was awesome because it is like the one thing I hate doing more than anything. I don't be bleeding, don't have mucus, like I'm good. So it truly depends, but for testing purposes, still be comfortable. If we're talking about trachs, go back and look at that. So ventilated patients, either trached or through an ET tube, look at their respiratory status at minimum every 2 hours. We want to suction and we want to hyperoxygenate, okay? They will be on continuous monitoring. We still need to reposition people. And this isn't just because of pressure ulcers, but also to help with oxygenation as well. These are the patients that we would be looking at ABGs at frequently. So they probably have a line where we can pull that blood off, and then they would adjust the settings as needed. If there is a tube in their throat, an ET tube, and they are awake, they can't talk to you. So we have to make sure that we can communicate to them. Don't ignore them. Give them a whiteboard. Don't speak to them like they're a child. I know it sounds like, duh, Amy, but you'd be surprised what you see out there. Facilitate communication as best as you can. With trachs, patients with trachs can still talk if they have the right valve applied to it. Brand new trachs, it'll be harder for them to speak, but once they go through speech therapy, they can get this thing called a Passy-Muir valve, and it allows for them to speak normally. So moral of the story is understand what's going on. Make sure that your patient can communicate the best for whatever scenario is in front of you. If there's an ET tube, picture boards, pointing things out, listening to people, you know, that sort of thing. People tend to neglect people that are intubated. It's interesting, or they don't talk to them. And also be cognizant is just because they're unconscious doesn't mean that they don't understand. There's been a lot of things where people have like woken up from comas or being intubated and they know everything. They were well aware. So medications. If they are going to be sedated, fentanyl and propofol are the two big drugs that we do with that. And then vecuronium is a paralyzing agent. So that is also something that means that they can't move. If you are administering vecuronium, you should probably make sure that they're intubated first because otherwise they can't breathe. Oh, I skipped that, my bad. So the complications. Trauma. We shoved a tube down your throat. We can expect some trauma. So when we extubate patients, we have to make sure that we're watching for any type of collapse, any signs of respiratory distress. It's going to hurt. I don't know if anybody's ever had surgery and been intubated during surgery. Like afterwards, it's really achy. Like there's nothing you can do about it. You can have a lozenge, woohoo, but it hurts. It's like a really bad sore throat. Also, after being ventilated or while being ventilated is holding on to fluid retention. We can see puffiness with fluids while we're trying to keep them hydrated. And then aspiration. Aspiration can absolutely happen when they're intubated. They need to be at a like semi-Fowler position. If they're laying flat, they're at high risk for aspiration or issues with peptic ulcer disease because of the backflow of stomach acid. So. And then we also have the issues with the ventilator acquired pneumonia. So to prevent that, keeping them elevated, PPIs. We don't talk about that for a few more weeks, but peptic proton pump inhibitors, GERD. These patients are typically on that because we want to neutralize the acid so it doesn't cause issues when they're laying down and not getting stuff. And then oral cares. Oral care is very important with our ventilated patients. Swabs, chlorhexidine, that sort of thing. They do also do daily sedation vacations, which means we are going to titrate down or turn off those sedative drugs to allow the body to just kind of like be normal as it can be. So with extubation, again, like I mentioned, those inflamed vocal cords are a big thing, so we want to rest their voice. This is one of those times where we have to tell the patient, like, you really need to be quiet. Let's rest those vocal cords. No complaining today. They may need oxygen therapy after extubation, so let's keep a lookout for that. Pulse oxes and ABGs. And then we have to be careful because there is a very good chance that after extubation, they need to be re-intubated because they just can't sustain it. Yeah, their blood work looked good. It looked like we were doing well, but then afterwards it's like, just kidding. And we have to put that tube back in. Re-intubation is very traumatic because you just had a tube down your throat. It's going to be swollen and inflamed. And now we have to use an even smaller tube because our airway isn't as big as it was the first time around. So we want to prevent re-intubation when possible. We also have to be careful for the effects of post-ICU syndrome. This is a very real thing. Patients can go into psychosis while in the ICU because of all the stimulation. It's really interesting. People go to hospitals because they're sick, but they can get worse while they're there because of all the noises and the lights and the whistles and the sounds, and it's overstimulation. So we can see some agitation and issues with that, and we need to be on the lookout for that. let's see here. I skipped this. We'll talk more about acute respiratory failure next week. Where'd it go? I don't know. So with this, basically with acute respiratory failure, the lungs cannot get enough oxygen. It could be due to a medical condition, like something going on in their body. It could be a virus, it could be bacterial. At any rate, they're going to be hypoxic, so they're not going to have good oxygen levels in their blood. Usually it's like less than 60. They're going to have high CO2 levels, and they're going to be acidotic. Again, we'll dive deeper into that next week, so I don't want you to worry about too much this week. And then moving right along here. Yeah. We're going to talk about legal considerations. Yuck, right? So, there are things like advanced directives, which is a document. Any of us can have advanced directives at any age, over 18. This is saying what we want done to us medically. If we can't make our needs known, this piece of paper is saying what I want. There's a DNR, which is a little bit different. That's a do not resuscitate. So that means no CPR. There's also a DNI, which is a do not intubate, which means, hey, maybe I want CPR, but don't stick a tube down my throat. Or they could have DNR, DNI, which means don't do anything. There is a power of attorney for healthcare, which is a legal document that gets signed saying that this person has the choice to make whatever choices they want for my healthcare if I can't. You'll hear this thrown around a lot. Well, I'm that person's power of attorney. Is it activated? Because if they're walkie-talkie and they're totally fine, you don't mean anything. So we have to be careful with that. A living will is similar to those lines. It gives like preferences and things along those lines. And then those are the ones that you're going to see the most often. The reason why we talk about it is because if they're intubated, they may not be able to let their needs be known, and these documents can be helpful. Anybody can gather up advanced directives for free. You can get a form from your state office in Utah and have it be known. You guys don't want to think about dying. I understand that. Your average age of your cohort is probably what? I don't know, 29, 30? My husband died at 35. We had, who dies at 35, right? So we didn't have any of that stuff in order. I would have no idea. So it's just good to have it in place. It's really common when women have babies, the OBs like to get that in place just because what if, you know, like if you have to be intubated, do you know what's going to happen? So it's important to understand your next of kin. If you're married, that's your spouse, right? If you're not married, it could be an adult child. Maybe you're divorced and your child's 19. That's your next of kin. They would make that choice. Or maybe it's still your parents. It truly depends on your age, where you're at, and what's going on. When you are delegating or designating this role to somebody, it is important that they are able to carry out your wishes. Because if they are your power of attorney, they could say, just kidding, nope, you are going to do what I want. And then it gets kind of shady. Or they might not be sound enough to make that decision themselves or secure enough. So are they going to carry out your wishes? So determining who your healthcare proxy is going to be can be a very stressful thing. It might not be your spouse. You know, are they able to say the tough stuff? My grandma had a stroke a few years and I had to make decisions, and I'm a master's prepared nurse. I know things, I've seen things, I get things, but when it's your own family member, it can be really difficult to make those choices. Organ donation. How many of you guys have a little orange sticker on the back of your license saying I'm an organ donor? Probably a lot of us, right? Do you know your next of kin can say, nope, you are not donating their organs, even though you wanted to? When they contact you to say, I'm sorry, this is what's going on, they're listed as an organ donor, your next of kin can say, no, I don't want you doing that to them. And they have to follow it. So my point is, make sure that your person knows your wishes, okay? So they don't get overridden. Make sure that also we're advocating. There may come times where, let's say the person's power of attorney is not acting in the best interest of their patient. Well, what can you do? Anybody know?
I would probably try to contact a social worker or my manager.
Absolutely. Most facilities have an ethics board that can get involved. If we are uncomfortable with the way that things are going, we can say, hey, can you help with this? It is okay to open your mouth. Do not be afraid to be an advocate. If you're wrong, and that's fine. But if we don't say anything, it's like watching somebody do something really bad and not doing anything to stop it. So, again, with these types of end of life things, they have to be in writing, they have to be legal. And most times, again, they have to be put into place, like being activated, which usually happens when somebody is impaired, mentally not there anymore, or incapacitated. So now my question to you, we'll come back here then, is, this is one that you guys cannot get wrong. Who would be considered your next of kin? Okay, yeah, most of you it's your spouse. They're hard conversations to have, but they should, because things can happen in an instant. And I know you guys have probably seen some crazy things with the weather in Utah and the mountains and snow and anything you could possibly think of. So they're tough conversations to have, but they are very important. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk. All right. Last thing we're going to go over is the art of delegation. So delegating is a really great thing. And we, as humans, I think tend to take on too much. And we don't always like to have people help us because maybe they won't do it the right way or whatever reason. When we're caring for patients, it is sometimes impossible to get done all the tasks that we need to do. So what can we have somebody help us with? Okay. So I don't know how common LPNs are used in your facilities in Utah. In Wisconsin, they're more in clinics, long-term care, even the prisons, that sort of thing. But I will tell you, I learned more from my LPN in my first nursing job than I probably did in 3 semesters of nursing, like my last 3 semesters of nursing school. Don't poo-poo a degree, ever. There is, I mean, the scope of practice might be a little different, but their experience can be vastly important to you as well. So LPNs typically, they cannot give IV push meds. With special training, they can start an IV, but they can't put any medications through it. And they also can't do the nursing process in a whole. So in a long-term care facility, they give their meds and they can do assessments, but they can't do that very first assessment. Or if there's a change in status, they can't do that assessment. That has to come from a nurse. And they also can't provide patient education, but they can reinforce it. Okay, so the RN is responsible for doing patient teaching. The LPN can help reinforce it. But they can help with meds, treatments, that sort of thing. our CNAs or patient care technicians, whatever you guys call them there, unlicensed assistive personnel. They cannot give meds. Med techs can, which is a totally different role. But they help with cares and feedings if it is not their first feeding. So if it is a new diet change or they're new to the unit, the very first feeding has to be done by the nurse. Because we're doing an assessment. Can they swallow safely? Is this okay? Once that's all good to go, then they can absolutely do all that kind of stuff. With special training, some places allow for CNAs, or they call them techs, to put in Foleys, put in IVs. It truly depends on the facility. In the ER, I had techs. They could put in NG tubes, they could put in Foleys, they could do IVs. Better than most of the nurses, by the way. Do the blood draws, but it's important to understand what you can delegate and what you can't. And it's okay to ask for help, okay? Trying to do everything on your own, you know, asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. It means that you understand, I have too much, somebody could suffer, okay? Let's go ahead and do that. You can just throw, what do we do first? Oh, wait.
Sit up.
We sit up. Okay, then what do we do?
Then inhale.
Would it be create a tight seal?
Yeah, we have to have it in our mouth first. So we have to
Oh.
create that tight seal.
Then inhale.
Then we're gonna inhale.
Then hold your breath and then exhale.
Yep. And we're gonna do that 10
Do it
times
again.
while it- Yep, repeat. All right. Okay, so he's so pretty. Okay. We have about 10-15 minutes. I have a couple more poll questions, so I'm gonna throw those at you guys. Oh, well, that's not the right question, so ignore that one. Here's a little memory question for you guys. Alrighty. So we have oxygen level of 91, wheezes, accessory muscles. What does that sound like to you? I know we didn't talk about it, but what does it sound like to you? Any guesses?
Asthma.
Sounds like asthma. And what medication do we give for asthma? Beta-2 agonists. So that's going to be your albuterol, that sort of thing. All right. $130. All right, so there's a lot in this question. And I feel like this question might be a little, it might confuse you a little bit. So they woke up confused. They have chills and chest pain that it's worse upon inspiration. Okay, I don't like that. What is the priority though? Nothing else has been done, just them saying this. The first thing that we're going to do, if they're talking about like what's given here, okay, we're going to get those vitals and those oxygen saturation. We need to assess them. The health history is important, but is it more important than getting a set of vital signs? Nah, because let's get those first and then we can get to health history. So that's where that kind of comes into play. And once we start talking about chest pain, like we do an EKG, but that's not an option. So, alrighty. Okay. All right, so what assessment parameter is most important for the nurse to assess? Tricky, tricky. With this one, our ABG levels are going to give us the most important information if we can start to wean them. How they did previously really doesn't have as much bearing as the blood levels currently would. So I know that that can be tricky. If it didn't work before, that doesn't mean it's not going to work this time. So I love that one. And I think I have one more. All right. Your favorite. Select all that apply. Okay. So, and this, they had a thoracentesis. What will we want to tell them? That's what this question is asking. It has a lot of words to say. What are we going to tell them could possibly happen? Mediastinal shift. Can that happen with a thoracentesis? Yes or no? Yes, it can. So I'm going to check that box. Pneumothorax. Yes or no? Yup, because I'm poking that lung in that area and stuff can. Bleeding. Yes, that can happen. And infection. Can that happen? Yep. The one that can't is arterial occlusion. We're not going near an artery. We're going into the pleural space. All right. So that one is kind of like, it sounds good though. It's like, oh, that sounds really complicated. I bet that could happen. Don't bite it. Just because you don't know what a word is or understand what the condition is doesn't mean that it makes it a good choice. More often than not, it's not. So, all right. What questions do you have regarding content, regarding the class? I post my lectures on YouTube. I will share the link where it will be. I have a channel set up. There'll be a playlist for all the Tuesday lectures and reviews and stuff that you'll see grow. Subscribe and then you always have it. You'll get notified when a new video gets posted. it's nice because you can speed it up and skip faster than if I were to import it into the class. I think it works a lot better. So I will get that posted for you guys. Again, I try not to post too many announcements. Maybe I'll send more group emails. I'm not sure, but I know it's a lot when you're like, oh my God, how many announcements can I get in a week with 3-4 classes? I get the overload. So I try not to. I will not post the link every week is what I'm saying. I'll definitely do it the first one, but I don't want to blow you up every week with here's the recording. It's always going to be there, if that makes sense. And if you access one, then you can access them all. Anything else?
I have a question for the outlines. Are those are for every week, right? Just for us to use and to take notes?
The outlines?
Like the rest, because there was one for this week, under the reading and resources, the respiratory outlines.
Oh, I think that's for the exam. The key concepts?
Those are for, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is it for the exam? Because this one just says ATI chapters 17 to 26. It just tells you where to look at. It's the respiratory outline.
Let's look real quick. Oh, what are you talking about? It's in week 1?
Yeah, under reading and resources, I believe that's where I got it. It's just like an outline of the stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, that's the respiratory key concept. So if you scroll to like 3 pages down, there'll be stuff that we talk about next week. So that's kind of it. Okay. You can use it how you want. Will it help you on the exam? I really don't know. It's an outline of everything that we talk about in the PowerPoints. Is really
okay. So it's not key of like what you need to know for this week, those kind of things.
It kind of is, but it kind of isn't because there's some other stuff in there too. So, and I'm not saying you, students as a whole like to know what's on the exam, and I completely get that because I've been in your shoes. But the goal of this course isn't just to teach you for this class, but also for your ATI and for your boards. So I might not test you directly on PFTs, like how we talked about, but your ATI could, if that makes sense. So I don't ever want you to feel like I'm teaching you something that's not going to be on the test, because you're right. It might not be on this test, but it might be on the final, or it might be somewhere else. So that doesn't help you, but it's just, it's a list of everything that we've talked about to help you kind of focus, because the book can be a little big.
That makes sense. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. If there are no other questions, you guys have a great rest of your day. If anything comes up, shoot me a message. Otherwise, enjoy your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.